My name is Soren Harwick, and I went to that cabin because I was tired of running from things I couldn't explain. After the death of my sister, Lily, I'd done nothing but run, from city to city, job to job, relationship to relationship, anything, to escape the silence of her absence. I thought maybe the mountains would help. A week alone in a small cabin, with no distractions. The first few days were peaceful. I stayed off my phone. I went hiking. I tried to think of nothing, but when I started hearing the echoes, I realized that nothing was going to work. It started softly at first, just whispers, voices faint and far away, like they were carried on the wind. But the thing is, the wind didn't make those sounds. On the fourth night, it got worse. I was lying in bed, trying to sleep, when I heard the door creak open. I froze, heart hammering in my chest. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then, I heard it, a voice, Lily's voice. It whispered, soft and clear, "Soren, you're not alone." I leaped up, turning on the lights. The room was empty. No door was open, but when I looked out the window, I saw a figure standing by the tree line, a dark silhouette, UNMOVING. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't tell who it was, too far, too still. I didn't go out. I didn't dare. But the voice came again, louder this time. "Soren, come to me." It sounded like Lily, but it wasn't. I could feel it, deep in my bones. Something was wrong. Something had used her voice. The next day, I tried to leave. I packed everything into the car, but the engine wouldn't start. Dead battery, I thought. So I walked to the nearest town, 4 miles, but when I came back, the cabin was ... different. The door was wide open, the lights flickering on and off. I entered cautiously. There was no sign of forced entry, but something was off. And there on the floor, in front of the fireplace, was a doll. Its eyes were too big, its limbs too stiff. The name tag on it said, Lily. I felt my blood run cold. I picked it up and threw it outside. That night, the whispers grew louder. There was something else now. Footsteps, slow, dragging, like someone was walking behind me. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I saw footprints outside the cabin, fresh, muddy, leading into the woods. I followed them. They led to a haloa, large, sunken area, with nothing but the faint smell of decay. Then, I heard it, a soft, childlike giggle. I turned, heart pounding. There, she was. Lily, her face twisted, eyes wide open, smile far too big. Empty. She took a step forward, and I could see now her body was cracked, like porcelain. Each step she took left a trail of dirt and moss. She whispered again, Soren, you shouldn't have left me. I didn't wait to hear more. I ran. The last thing I remember before blacking out was her laughter. When I woke up, I was back at the cabin, alone. But the whispers didn't stop. They never stopped. Now, I hear them everywhere I go. Lily's voice, and something else, something behind her. A deep, malevolent echo, waiting. My name is Vanek Harlow, and 3 nights ago, I played a game I should have never agreed to. I was invited by my old college friend Miles to a remote cabin for a guy's weekend. No tech, no stress, just beer and stories. There were 5 of us, me, Miles, Jude, Tanner, and Eli. The place was buried in the woods, a 1-floor structure surrounded by thick pine and silence. On the second night, Miles got drunk and suggested we play the lantern game. He said he learned it from a guy in Romania. Said it was just for laughs. Here's how it went. One person hides an old lantern in the woods while the rest wait inside. When the person returns, we each go out alone to find it. If we bring it back, we win. If we fail, ... Well, Miles never said what happened. Eli went first. He was gone 30 minutes. When he came back, he looked weird, pale, quiet. Next was Jude. He never came back. We waited, called his name. No answer. Tanner went to look for him, came back running, breathless. There's someone else out there, he gasped. But it's not Jude. Miles laughed. That's part of the game. When I asked what he meant, he shrugged. They say if you take the lantern without asking, it follows you back. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, Miles was missing. So was Tanner. We found the lantern inside the cabin, lit though no one had touched it. Eli sat in the corner, rocking, whispering something over and over. Don't look at its face. I decided to leave. I made it 20 feet into the woods when I heard a voice behind me, soft, delicate. Vanek, you forgot the lantern. I turned. There it was. Not a person, not even close. It had Miles's mouth, Jude's eyes, and something else. Something that grinned wrong, like it was trying to remember how humans smile. I ran, didn't stop until the sun rose. The others were never found. Now, at night, I hear the soft hiss of a lantern flame outside my window, and sometimes, a voice calls gently from the darkness. Your turn, Vanek. My name is Becklin Marr, and I never believed in family curses until I inherited one. The cabin belonged to my great-uncle Rhodes. He was a recluse, the kind who spoke in riddles and claimed the forest had a heartbeat. When he died, the cabin was left to me. No one else wanted it. I went up to sign some paperwork, clean things out, and maybe stay a night or two. It was remote, no cell service, no neighbors, and the path leading in was more animal trail than road. The first thing I noticed was the lantern. An old rusted oil lantern hanging from a crooked nail on the porch. It wasn't lit, yet somehow, every night after sundown, it glowed faintly. I assumed some kind of chemical reaction or old fuel until I realized there was no fuel inside. On my third night, I heard someone walking outside. Soft steps in the snow. I peeked out the window. Through the frost, I saw a small figure standing by the edge of the trees, no taller than a child, holding an old lantern. His face was shadowed. Still, he never came closer, just stood there, watching. In the morning, no footprints. I mentioned it to the local clerk when I went into town. Her face paled. You saw the lantern boy, she whispered. He comes when you're marked. I asked what that meant, but she wouldn't say more. That night, I left the porch lantern where it was and locked the door. At 1:13 a.m., I woke up. Two lights spilling through the cracks. The lantern on the porch was blazing now, brighter than oil could burn. Shadows danced across the walls, inside figures, dozens of them, flickering like firelight illusions. Then I saw the boy Egan inside the cabin. He stood in the corner, silent, holding the same lantern. His clothes were old, torn, wet. His skin, gray-blue, like he'd been pulled from a lake. He didn't blink, just whispered, "It's your turn now." I screamed. He vanished. The lantern went dark. Next morning, I packed. As I reached my car, I saw it. The lantern, sitting on the hood. I threw it into the woods and drove off. But that night, in my apartment miles from the cabin, the light came back. I walked into my kitchen and found the lantern on my table, lit, glowing, waiting, and then came the tapping. On the glass, tiny fingers. A child's silhouette on the other side of my balcony door. I moved, states away. But the lantern always finds me. It shows up near dark, on buses, in hotel drawers. I even saw it once, in a mirror, hanging behind me. They say the lantern boy drowned, and whoever sees him must take his place. I don't know how long I've got left, but when the lantern lights, I lock every door and whisper to the shadows, "Not tonight." My name is Ellis Crane, and I've never liked the cold. So when my cousin offered me his cabin in Vermont for a week, I almost declined. But after my burnout at the agency and a panic attack during a client pitch, I needed to unplug. No clients, no deadlines, Just snow, silence, and sleep. The place was simple. One floor, single bed, fireplace, dead center. What stuck out was the chimney. It was massive. Too big for the cabin's size. Thick, dark bricks stretching higher than the roof. Itself. The first night, I made a fire. The wood hissed like it was wet, but it caught eventually. I curled up on the couch with a blanket and watched the flames dance. Then, just as I was drifting off, I heard it. A voice inside the chimney, faint, like someone whispering down through the flue. I sat up. It came again, louder this time, low, gravelly. Is someone there? I called out, trying to keep it together. No reply, just crackling wood. I blamed it on the wind and went to bed. The next night, I heard it again. This time, the whisper came with a rhythm, a pattern, like someone reciting something from memory. I grabbed my phone and recorded the sound. When I played it back, I heard something I hadn't noticed before. Second voice, quieter than the first, repeating certain words, mocking them. Come down, it said. Come see. I didn't sleep that night. On the third day, I examined the chimney from the outside. No birds, no nests, no cracks, just thick brick and an iron flue cover. But inside, I noticed something new. Scratches in the soot lining the interior walls, like fingernails, desperate, deep. That night, I left the fire UNLIT. At 1:06 a.m., I heard the iron flue open. No wind, no draft, just a slow, metallic creak. Then, whispering. One voice, not too many. They were arguing, fighting, then laughing, and then they said my name. Not close, not loud, but clearly. I backed away from the fireplace. Suddenly, the fire lit itself. What I hadn't stacked ignited. The flames turned blue, then green. Smoke poured out, not up, but down from the chimney, swirling into the room like fog. Inside the smoke, I saw them, faces, dozens of them, pale, ash-covered, eyes wide with hunger or terror. I couldn't tell which. One of them mouthed, "Let us back." I ran. I tried the door. It wouldn't budge. Windows nailed shut. My phone dead. The fire roared behind me. Then the chimney screamed. A howl of voices, overlapping, crying, begging, accusing. I dropped to the floor and covered my ears. When it stopped, the fire was out. The room was cold again, and the flue welded shut from the inside. I left that morning, breaking a window, to escape later. I searched the property records. Found one article, 1973. Family of 6 dies in chimney collapse. All remains found inside shaft. No funeral, no closure, just ... lost in smoke. And sometimes, on cold nights, I swear I still hear them whispering from the walls. My name is Alira Dunn, and I don't scare easily. I've spent my life restoring forgotten places, abandoned barns, crumbling lighthouses, off-the-grid cabins. Most people see decay. I see stories waiting to be told again. When I bought the old Braxton cabin deep in the Vermont woods, I thought I was rescuing history. But some stories should stay buried. The structure was rough, roof caved in, moss thick as carpet, and a door hanging by one hinge. But beneath it, rot. The bones were solid. The place had a kind of haunted charm I couldn't resist. First thing I noticed was the cellar door. It was padlocked, thick iron, old, but not rusted, almost maintained. The key wasn't anywhere in the house. I figured I'd bust it open later. Once the rest of the place was cleaned, over the next few days, weird things began piling up. My phone kept restarting. Tools vanished from where I left them. At night, I'd hear creaks beneath the floor, like someone walking slowly in circles under my bed. I blamed the cabin's age. Wood settles, animals scurry. That's normal. Then came the scratching. It started the 5th night. Not loud, just faint, like nails dragging along stone. It came from beneath the floor, right above the cellar. I stood over the trapdoor with my flashlight, listening. It stopped. The next morning I noticed something strange. The cellar lock looked newer, shinier, like it had been replaced. I didn't do that. No one else should have been there. I decided to remove it. I brought my crowbar and chisel, wedged them under the hasp, and pried. The lock didn't break, but the cabin groaned, loudly, like something was straining to hold its breath. That night, the scratching turned into knocking. One knock every 10 seconds, like a heartbeat, from inside the cellar. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I packed my things. I was ready to leave, call it a loss. But when I stepped outside, everything was gone. My car, my tools, my bags. The clearing around the cabin had grown. Trees farther away. Sky darker. Air heavier. The cabin wasn't letting me go. I went back in, trembling, and heard whispering behind the walls. Just one word. Down. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed a hammer and smashed the lock off. The trapdoor creaked open slowly, revealing a steep staircase into pure black. The air that rose was wet, cold, and smelled like dirt and copper. I went down. The steps groaned, but held. My flashlight barely pierced the dark. I reached a stone floor, walls dripping with moisture, and in the center, chained to the wall, was a person. No, something shaped like a person. It was pale, translucent, and its eyes were covered with a cloth soaked in something black. Its mouth was stitched shut with wire. But I swear to you, Elira Dunn, of rational mind and steady hand, it smiled when it heard me. I turned to run, but the stairs were gone. The cellar door above was bricked over. Now I live down here. I don't eat. I don't drink. I don't breathe the same way anymore. The thing beside me doesn't speak, but I feel it, sharing thoughts, memories. I was the latest one who opened the door. I won't be the last, because the cabin's still out there, waiting to be bought again. My name is Ronan Wexley, and I haven't spoken to anyone in 3 months. Not because I didn't want to, but because no one else is left. I used to be a wilderness guide in Colorado, made my living helping tourists disconnect from their devices and reconnect with nature. The irony, nature's what took them from me. It started with a simple trip for clients Gareth, Isla, Devin, and Paige. We were supposed to hike for 2 days and stay in a remote cabin I knew about. No service, no GPS, just maps, firewood, and the chirp of crickets. Everyone loved the idea, said it was exactly what they needed. We reached the cabin just before sundown. It looked the same as I remembered: aged pine walls, moss creeping up the sides, and a door that shrieked like it hadn't been opened in years. Inside, the fireplace was untouched, the bunks were dusty, and everything smelled of rot and sap. They laughed it off, said it was authentic. The first night, nothing strange happened. We made a fire, told stories, drank cheap whiskey. But sometime past midnight, I heard whispering outside the cabin, like someone was circling it, dragging their voice around the walls. I thought it might be the wind, or a fox, so I checked. Nothing. But the next morning, Gareth swore he saw someone watching us from the tree line. Black coat, no face, he muttered, refusing breakfast. I hiked the perimeter. No footprints. No sign of anyone but us. That night, the whispers returned louder this time, not just outside, inside the walls. Like the logs themselves were mumbling. Paige sat up in her bunk, pale. It said my name, she whispered. It was inside the wood. I tried to stay calm, play skeptic. It's the wind. Old cabins groan. You're tired. But then Devin started screaming. When we rushed to him, his nose was bleeding, and he kept clawing at the walls, yelling, "Let me out. It wants to burn again, again." By morning, he was gone. The front door stood wide open, his boots still by the fire. No prints, no trail. We wanted to leave. We tried to leave, but every path we took looped us back to the cabin. I even threw a marked rock ahead of us. When we finally gave up and returned, there it was, lying beside the front step. Hila lost it next. She began muttering things none of us understood, some language I've never heard. Her voice changed, low guttural. She started gouging symbols into the wooden floor with her fingernails. We restrained her, but that night, she vanished too. Just like Devon, Dot, and Gareth. He hanged himself with his own belt from the ceiling beam, the one with that deep black burn mark I never noticed until then. Paige and I didn't sleep after that. We sat back to back with knives and lanterns. She held my hand, kept whispering that she didn't want to become part of the wood, but I fell asleep. When I woke, only her boots were left. One by the fire, one outside. Now, it's just me, and I can hear them every night. The voices inside the walls, they call to me. They speak in Paige's voice, Devon's, even Gareth's. They don't beg for help. They invite me to join them. The logs are full now, crammed with faces you can only see in the right light. When the fire pops, they flinch. When the cabin creaks, they sigh. I don't know how long I've been here. I stopped counting the days after the sun started rising from the wrong direction. But I'm still not leaving. The cabin won't let me, and part of me doesn't want to anymore. Not since the walls started whispering my name. My name is Irvon Thorne, and I just wanted silence. After my divorce, I rented a small mountain cabin far from anyone. Just me, the cold air, and the groaning pines. No phone, no people, just peace. The cabin was old, creaky, but charming. Wood stove, rocking chair, bookshelves carved by hand. It smelled of cedar and smoke. I thought I'd found sanctuary, but by the second night, I heard whistling. At first, I thought it was the wind, but wind doesn't follow patterns. It came in bursts for short notes, always the same, almost like a lullaby. It echoed softly from inside the walls. I knocked. Nothing answered. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stuffed towels under the doors, lit every lamp. Still, the whistling continued, now closer, now ... below. The floorboards under my bed felt hollow, so I moved the bed and found a trapdoor. It hadn't been mentioned in the rental listing. Against every survival instinct, I opened it. Inside was a narrow crawl space and, scratched into the wood, "If you hear the song, don't hum along." I slammed it shut and poured bourbon until I passed out in the chair. The next day, I contacted the owner. She sounded ... nervous. "You didn't go under the floor, did you?" I lied. "No," she sighed. "It's probably just the pipes, or birds in the chimney. Don't worry." But that night, I heard someone humming along. The whistling returns for notes, but followed now by a breathy, off-key voice, mimicking it. I froze. Then the voice whispered, "Too late now." And from the crawl space, a hand reached up, gray and boneless, fingers too long, nails tapping the rhythm on the wood. I ran, left the cabin in the middle of the night, and never looked back. But now, no matter where I sleep, I hear the song. 4 soft whistles, then the voice, then the tapping, and worst of all, last night, I caught myself humming along. My name is Callan Rove, and last week, I killed a man. At least, I think I did. Let me explain. It started with a rental, a solo escape, just me, a bottle of bourbon, and a lakefront cabin deep in the pines of Oregon. No Wi-Fi, no distractions, just silence. The ad said Stillwater Cabin, total peace. The first 2 days were quiet. I wrote, I hiked, I drank. At night, I'd sit on the dock, listening to the water lap at the shore, like a sleeping beast. But on the third night, I saw a man staring at me from across the lake. No boat, No cabin there, just trees. He wore old suspenders, bare feet, sunk in the mud, and held something broken, or, when I blinked, he was gone. I laughed it off. Maybe the bourbon was stronger than I thought. The next night, I found muddy footprints on the dock, barefoot, coming from the lake to the cabin. Steps. I didn't sleep. At 3:12 a.m., I heard the screen door creak, then a wet slap on the wooden floorboards. I grabbed the fire poker and stepped into the living room. There he was, soaked, pale, rotting. Water dripped from his jaw as he raised the oar and pointed it at me. "Your turn," he rasped. I swung the poker. It cracked into his shoulder, and he crumpled to the floor with a horrible squelch. When I turned on the light, he was gone. Only the floor remained soaked, and the fire poker was covered in moss. I should have left, I know, but I didn't. Something kept me there. The next day, I found a journal beneath the floorboards. Entries from 1974, all from a man named Clyde talking about a visitor who came from the lake every 7 years, always with the same words, "Your turn." Clyde had killed the man, or thought he did, but the entries stopped abruptly. That night I chained the door, but at 3:12 a.m. exactly, I heard dripping in the hallway. He was back, only now, he looked like me, same shirt, same face, same eyes, just lifeless. "Your turn," he whispered, dropping the oar at my feet. Then he lunged. I stabbed, screamed, fought. In the end, he sank beneath the floorboards, water spreading in all directions. I left at dawn, but I haven't felt right since. My reflection moves slower. I don't cast a shadow near water. And last night, I stood at the edge of my bathtub and whispered, "Your turn." My name is Orrin Pike, and I used to be a skeptic. Ghosts, curses, haunted woods, never bought into any of it. I studied architecture. I believed in straight lines, measured angles, and things that made sense. That's why what happened to me in the Dellinger cabin still haunts every rational part of me. It started with a call from a friend, Jaden. He inherited the place on Old Mountain Cabin up in Maine and asked me to help restore it. "It's falling apart, but the bones are good," he said. I drove up with tools and blueprints. The cabin was ugly, uneven, like it had been built in a hurry, with no plan. The roof slanted wrong, doorways crooked, but the strangest part, on the east wall, the inside had a window. The outside didn't. I checked 3 times. From the inside, there was a tall window beside the fireplace. Glass cracked, frame chipped, but definitely a window. From the outside, just wall, no hole, no outline, no patchwork. I told Jaden. He laughed. "Yeah, that's the window that wasn't there." He said it like it was a joke. But when I asked him about it later, he got weird, stiff, told me to just leave it alone. That night, I stayed in the cabin alone. Jaden had to run to town. I tried reading, but I kept glancing at that damn window. There was nothing out there, just trees. Fog. At 2:47 a.m., I heard tapping, 3 light knocks. I froze. The sound came from the window, the one that wasn't there. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped closer. On the other side of the glass, a man was standing in the woods, pale, bald, barefoot. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at me through the glass. I ran outside. Nobody, but I noticed something else. My own footprints were the only ones in the snow. I went back in. The man was gone, but now the window was clean. No cracks, no dirt, like someone had just wiped it from the outside. I barely slept by morning. Jaden still hadn't returned. I tried to leave, packed up, but the car wouldn't start. Dead. No signal either. I waited till dark, and at exactly 2:47 a.m., tapping this time, louder. I didn't go to the window. I stayed frozen on the floor. The tapping turned into knocking, then pounding. I saw a shape beyond the glass. Not just one man, several. All bald, all barefoot, all staring. They began pressing their faces to the glass. But there wasn't supposed to be glass. The inside of the window began to frost over. From the inside, my breath fogged. The room turned cold. Then came the voices. We remember. Let us in. We built this. I ran to the front door, locked. Tried the back, sealed shut. No escape. The pounding grew louder. I screamed. Then silence. When I turned around, the window was gone. Gone. Just a solid wall, as if it had never been there. But when I went to leave in the morning, Jaden's truck was parked outside, covered in snow, driver's seat empty, engine still warm, no sign of him, no tracks, nothing. I never saw him again. I found one thing in the cabin before I left it. Piece of old paper wedged behind the fireplace. A sketch, blueprint style, a rough drawing of the east wall, and on it, written in faded pencil, "Do not build the window." My name is Merrick Vale, and I manage vacation rentals. We market them as off-grid getaways for digital detoxers. Wood cabins, no Wi-Fi, no neighbors, no distractions. Clients eat that rustic fantasy up. 3 months ago, I added a new property to our roster, a one-room cabin up in the Adirondacks. The owner had vanished years ago. The place was untouched, furniture still inside, even the old guest book on the table. A weird find, sure, but perfect for marketing. I gave it the listing name Cabin Hollow. Our first guest stayed 3 nights. A young couple, Melissa and Grant. They didn't leave a review. I followed up, no reply. I assumed they just moved on. But then it happened again. The next guest didn't respond. Then another. 7 guests total. Each one stayed, each one vanished. From all contact. I should have pulled the listing. I didn't. Money talks louder than worry. I drove up myself, planning to stay 1 night and investigate. The drive was smooth. The trail markers were still there. The cabin looked just like the photos, simple, pine wood walls, a single bed, and that guest book still sitting center on the table. Out of curiosity, I flipped it open. The pages were blank. No sign, no notes, just completely empty. I thought, maybe I brought the wrong book. But the leather cover was clearly aged, same as the photos from our first inspection. I stayed the night at 2:13 a.m. I woke to the sound of a page turning, not wind, not mice. A slow, deliberate flip. I turned on my phone flashlight and aimed it at the table. The guest book was open midway through the pages. I hadn't touched it. I approached, slowly, holding my breath. There, in spidery handwriting, were 2 fresh entries. Melissa Cray, -3 nights, Grant Teller, 3 nights. He flipped back through the book. More names began appearing before my eyes, forming from nothing like ink bleeding into old paper. Marisol Green, 2 nights, Theo Adams, 4 nights, Jasper Lynn, 3 nights. Me, chest tightened. My hands went cold. I slammed the book shut. I packed up and sprinted to my car. It wasn't there. The trail was gone too, replaced by thick trees where the path had been. I ran back to the cabin. Its door was already open. On the table was the GUESTBOOK. It was open to a new page. Merrick Vale. One night he stayed frozen in place for hours, until the sun didn't rise. Time broke. Outside, it's always twilight now. Inside, the clock blinks. 2:13 a.m. Constant. Unchanging. I've tried burning the guest book. It won't catch fire. I buried it, returned to the table. I ripped it to shreds. Next day, it was whole again, and waiting, each night. I hear the door creak open. Footsteps circle the cabin. The guest book turns a page on its own, and new names appear, names I don't know. People who haven't arrived yet. I think the cabin wants us here. I think it feeds off our presence, not our pain, not our screams, just our stay. You might stumble across Cabin Hollow on some rental site, might think it's cute, private, romantic, but if you go, don't write your name in the book, it writes it for you. My name is Nathan, and I've always loved books. There's something magical about losing yourself in a story, letting the pages turn as you drift into another world. But sometimes, a book is more than just a story. Sometimes, it's a trap. It started when I moved to a new city. I was looking for something to do one afternoon, so I decided to explore a local library I had heard about. It wasn't anything special from the outside, just an old gray building tucked away on a quiet street. The sign out front said the Forgotten Library, but I didn't think much of it. I was always up for a good read, so I went inside. The library was eerily quiet. Not a single person in sight, just rows upon rows of dusty bookshelves. The air was thick with the smell of old paper, and the floors creaked with every step I took. I wandered through the aisles, letting my fingers graze over the spines of the books. But there was something unsettling about it. The books seemed too quiet, too still, like they were waiting for something. I reached the back of the library, where a small door stood. It was half hidden behind a curtain of cobwebs, as though it hadn't been opened in years. The sign above the door read, "Restricted Section." My curiosity got the better of me. I pushed the door open. Beyond the door, I found a narrow staircase that led down into darkness. The air grew cold, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. But I wasn't about to back down now. I had come this far. I descended the stairs, each step creaking beneath my weight. The further I went, the darker it became. And then, I saw the room at the bottom of the stairs. It wasn't a typical library. This place was different. The shelves were lined with ancient-looking books, their covers torn and faded. The walls were lined with strange symbols, scratched into the stone like some kind of forgotten language. But what really caught my attention was the book at the center of the room. It was sitting on a pedestal, bathed in a soft, unnatural light. The cover was a deep shade of crimson, with gold lettering that seemed to shimmer in the dimness. I couldn't resist. I approached the pedestal and opened the book. The moment I touched the pages, a strange chill washed over me. I felt the world around me shift. The air grew heavier, pressing in on me. I tried to pull my hand away, but it was as if the book had a hold on me. The pages began to turn on their own, flipping rapidly, as though someone was guiding them. And then, I heard it, a voice, soft at first, but growing louder with each passing moment. "You shouldn't have come here." I froze, my blood running cold. The voice wasn't coming from anywhere in particular. It was coming from the book itself, echoing through my mind. The words were chilling, filled with a sense of warning, but there was something else, something darker. "You will never leave." Panic set in. I tried to close the book, but the pages wouldn't stop turning. They were speeding up, faster and faster, until they were nothing but a blur. The voice grew louder, its tone more frantic, more desperate. "It's too late now. You're trapped." I couldn't breathe. The room seemed to close in on me, the walls pressing against me like a vice. The symbols on the walls began to glow, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance around me. I looked back at the book. The pages were no longer turning. They had stopped at a page that was completely blank. And then, I saw it written in a hand that wasn't my own. The words appeared on the page, glowing with an unholy light. "Nathan will never leave. He is ours." I screamed, trying to break free, but it was too late. The room, the library, the world itself, all of it seemed to fade away. The book had consumed me, dragged me into its pages, and now I was part of its story. I don't know how long it's been since that night. Time doesn't exist here. I've tried to escape, but every time I try to leave, I end up back in the library. The same shelves, the same books, the same restricted section, and the voice. It's always with me. You're still here, Nathan. You'll never leave. I am now one of the forgotten, a part of the library. And if you ever visit, if you ever wander down that staircase, you may find my story waiting for you. A warning to anyone who dares open the book. But don't worry, the library is always looking for new stories. My name is Evelyn, and I've always been a skeptic. I don't believe in ghosts or supernatural things, or at least, I didn't, until that night. A lot of people would have run from what happened, but I didn't. Now, I wish I had. It all started when I moved into a new apartment. It wasn't fancy, but it was cheap, and that's what I needed at the time. The building was old, a bit run down, but nothing that seemed too out of the ordinary. The apartment was on the top floor, at the very end of the hall. I thought it was a bit odd that no one else had taken it, but I shrugged it off. It wasn't my concern. The first few days were uneventful. I unpacked my things, settled into the quiet space. But then, it started. At night, when everything was still, I began hearing soft whispers. I thought it was the neighbors at first, maybe talking through the thin walls, but it didn't sound like normal voices. They were too soft, too distant, and always, they seemed to come from the walls themselves. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was just the old building settling, maybe the pipes, or the wind, or something else rational. But the whispers kept getting louder. The voices didn't speak words at first, just unintelligible murmurs. But then, I began hearing my name, Evelyn. It was faint, barely audible, but unmistakable. It was a woman's voice, soothing but strange. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. There was no one there. I looked around, checking every corner of my apartment. Nothing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching me. The next night, I stayed up late, trying to catch whatever it was. And that's when it happened. The walls, they moved. I don't know how to explain it, but the walls seemed to pulse, like they were breathing. The soft whispers grew louder, turning into desperate, frantic voices. Evelyn, help us. I backed away from the walls. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't understand what was happening, but I knew one thing for sure. The apartment wasn't empty. It was alive. The next morning, I decided to leave, to get out of there, but when I reached the door, it wouldn't open. I twisted the knob, but it was as if the door was sealed shut, held in place by an invisible force. I pounded on the door, yelling for help, but there was no answer. The hallway was silent. Desperation began to set in. I tried every other door in the apartment, but they were all the same, sealed. I was trapped. The whispers in the walls had become louder now, almost unbearable. They were no longer just calling my name, they were begging. Evelyn, save us. Save us. I collapsed to my knees, unable to think straight. I felt dizzy, disoriented. The walls seemed to close in on me. The air grew thick, suffocating. And then, through the whispers, I heard something that froze my blood. Evelyn, you're one of us now. I looked up, my eyes wide in terror, and that's when I saw it. In the corner of the room, standing just beyond the threshold of the living room, was a figure. It was pale, translucent, barely visible, but I could see the shape of it. It was a woman, tall, thin, with hollow eyes and a wide, twisted smile. She was inside the walls. She was part of them. No, I whispered, backing away, but the figure stepped forward, her limbs contorting unnaturally. She crawled along the walls, her head tilting at an angle that shouldn't have been possible. You can't leave, she said, her voice echoing in my mind. We need you, Evelyn. You belong to us now. I scrambled to my feet, my body trembling, but the apartment seemed to grow smaller, the walls pushing in. The whispers became a deafening roar, a chorus of voices pleading for help, cursing, crying. I ran to the windows, but they were sealed shut, too. I turned to the door, but the woman was there now, blocking the way. "You can't escape," she hissed. I don't know how long I was trapped in that apartment. Time felt like it stopped, but eventually, I gave up fighting. I collapsed in the corner of the room, listening to the whispers that had now become my only companions. And then, I realized something. Those whispers, those voices, weren't asking for help. They were offering help. They were the souls of people who had once lived in this building, trapped inside the walls, forever prisoners of this cursed place. And now, I was one of them. My name is Lucas, and I've spent most of my life traveling. Long road trips, endless hours on the highway, always looking for the next adventure. But there's one place I'll never forget, a little diner on the edge of nowhere. It was just like any other night. I was driving through the back roads, trying to get to the next town before I ran out of gas. The roads were empty, the kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're the only person alive. That's when I saw the sign Midnight Diner, glowing in the dark. It wasn't on any map, and I didn't recall ever passing it before. Curiosity got the better of me, and I pulled off the road. The diner looked run down, old, with flickering lights that made it seem like it belonged in another time. But the lights were on, and the smell of food was unmistakable. So I figured I'd stop for a quick bite as I walked inside. The bell above the door jingled, and I was greeted by a woman behind the counter. She had pale skin and dark hair, with a smile that seemed a little too wide, too perfect. But I didn't think much of it. People are strange sometimes. "Welcome to Midnight Diner," she said, her voice sweet, but with an odd edge to it. "What can I get you?" I sat at the counter and ordered a burger, something simple. The place was nearly empty, save for a few patrons sitting in the booths. They were all hunched over their meals, eating quietly, not speaking a word. It was ... eerie. Like they were all part of the same strange dream as I ate. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The woman behind the counter kept staring at me, her eyes never leaving mine. Every now and then, she would walk by, her footsteps too soft to hear, but I felt her presence, like she was just behind me, breathing down my neck. I decided it was time to leave, but when I looked around, I realized something. There was no door to the outside. The diner had no exit. I stood up, my heart pounding. I walked over to the door, the one I had entered through, but it wasn't a door at all. It was just a blank wall, smooth and featureless, as if there had never been an entrance. Panic set in. I turned to the woman at the counter, but she was still smiling, watching me with those unnerving eyes. "Something wrong, hun?" she asked, her voice syrupy sweet. I need to go," I stammered, my voice shaking. "Where's the door? Let me out." She leaned forward, her smile growing even wider. "The door," she repeated, her voice cold now. "Oh, there is no door. Not for you." I backed away from her, my breath quickening. I tried to force my way through the wall, but it was solid, cold to the touch. My mind raced. I had to escape, but I couldn't. Something had trapped me here. The patrons in the booths didn't move, didn't look at me. They just kept eating, chewing their food in slow, deliberate motions. The silence in the room was deafening, and the air felt thick, as if time had stopped. Suddenly, the woman behind the counter let out a low laugh, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "You shouldn't have come here," she said, her eyes now gleaming with something darker. "This place isn't for people like you. You can never leave." I tried to break the window, but it was no use. The glass was unbreakable. My heart raced as the reality of the situation hit me. I wasn't just stuck in a diner, I was trapped in some kind of nightmare then. As I turned to look around the room, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The patrons, the ones who had been eating in silence, were no longer human. Their faces were distorted, twisted, their eyes hollow and black. Their mouths were wide open, stretching unnaturally, their teeth sharp and jagged. They weren't eating, they were feeding on something far worse than food. They were feeding on the memories of anyone who entered the diner. I turned to the woman, the source of all of this, and her smile faded into something darker, more sinister. "Welcome to Midnight Diner," she said softly. "You'll never leave. You're ours now." I screamed, pounding on the walls, desperate to break free. But it was too late. The diners around me began to stand up, their monstrous forms closing in, their mouths opening wide, ready to consume me. I realized then that Midnight Diner wasn't a place, it was a trap, a never-ending cycle of lost souls, all trapped in that place, unable to escape. I was just another meal for them, just another person to feed on, and now, I wait. I wait for the next traveler, the next lost soul, to wander in. I wait for them to see the sign and enter, just like I did. Because once you're here, there's no way out, and they're always hungry. My name is James, and I've always been a bit of a skeptic. I don't believe in ghosts or supernatural phenomena. At least, that's what I thought. That was before I encountered something I can't explain. It was an ordinary Saturday afternoon when I decided to do some spring cleaning in my apartment. The place wasn't exactly dirty, but I figured it could use a bit of tidying up. I moved the couch, vacuumed the corners, and dusted off the old mirror hanging above the fireplace. It was an antique, passed down through my family. I'd always found it a little creepy, but it had a certain charm to it, so I kept it. As I polished the glass, I noticed something strange. The reflection in the mirror didn't seem to match the room I was standing in. The walls in the reflection were a different color, darker, almost black, and the furniture was not where it should be. The room looked wrong. I blinked and stepped back, convinced it was just my eyes playing tricks on me. After all, I'd been cleaning for hours, and my mind was probably a little foggy. But as I stared into the mirror, the reflection began to change. The furniture shifted, and a figure appeared in the corner of the room. It was a woman tall, with long, flowing hair. She was standing still, watching me, but her eyes weren't focused on me. They were locked on something behind me, her gaze intense and unsettling. I spun around quickly, but there was no one there. The room was empty. I turned back to the mirror, and the woman was still there, her eyes following me. I could feel her presence, like she was trying to tell me something. I took a deep breath and approached the mirror again, closer this time. The woman's reflection smiled, a slow, sinister grin that made my stomach churn. Her eyes gleamed, with a knowing look, as if she was trying to communicate something through the glass. Before I could react, she moved, stepping forward in the reflection. I stepped back, heart racing, but the woman didn't follow me. She just stayed in the same spot, her eyes now staring directly into mine. I reached out, hesitant, and touched the mirror. The glass felt cold, colder than it should have, as though it had been frozen. My hand lingered on it for a moment, and that's when it happened. The woman's reflection reached out to me. Her fingers touched the glass where my hand was, and for a moment, I felt an icy chill travel up my arm. Then, to my horror, I realized that her fingers weren't just a reflection, they were coming through the glass. The mirror rippled like water, and her hand emerged fully, cold and pale, reaching for me. I screamed and stumbled back, falling to the floor. The mirror returned to normal, the reflection showing only the empty room once again. The woman was gone, but the cold lingered in the air, wrapping around me like a heavy fog. Shaken, I got up and immediately covered the mirror with a sheet. I thought I was imagining things, that maybe I was overtired or hallucinating. But the next few nights proved me wrong. Each night, I would hear strange noises, soft tapping, like fingers against glass. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just the house settling, but the tapping grew louder, more insistent. It came from the mirror. I couldn't stand it anymore. I needed to know what was happening. So, I uncovered the mirror again, this time with a sense of dread hanging over me. I stared at my own reflection, hoping that whatever had happened would be gone. But it wasn't. The woman was back. This time, she was standing right behind me, in the reflection, her hand on my shoulder. I froze, my heart racing as I turned to look, but there was no one there. The room was silent, empty. I turned back to the mirror, and the woman smiled again, her grin wide and unsettling. But this time, something was different. Her eyes were no longer just watching me, they were pleading, as if begging for help. "Please," she whispered, her voice soft but clear, "help me." I didn't know what to do. The reflection seemed so real, like she was right there with me, but I couldn't understand what she wanted. She was reaching out, but the mirror kept her trapped. I reached for the mirror once again, unsure of what I was doing. But before I could touch it, the woman's reflection grabbed my hand, pulling me closer. Her grip was cold, her fingers tight around mine, and I could feel something darker behind her eyes. "Don't let go," she whispered urgently, but it was too late. As soon as I touched the glass, the mirror shattered. I fell back, covering my face as shards of glass flew in every direction. When I looked up, the room was completely silent. The woman was gone, but I wasn't alone. The whispers continued, not from the mirror anymore, but from somewhere deeper inside the walls. They were faint at first, but they grew louder, as if something or someone was trying to break through. I left that night, abandoning the house and everything in it. But the whispers never stopped, and now, wherever I go, I can hear them soft, persistent, like a voice calling from the other side of the glass. My name is Eric, and I've always been the kind of person who enjoys a good mystery. I've lived in my house for 3 years now, and for the most part, everything's been fine. But recently, I stumbled upon something that I can't explain, something that's been lurking right under my nose all this time. It started with a strange sound. It wasn't a knock or a creak from the old wood floors. It was more like a tapping, soft but persistent, coming from the walls. At first I thought it was just the house settling, but the noise continued. Night after night, I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But one evening, as I was cleaning out the basement, I discovered something unusual. A door. Now, I've been in this basement 100 times, but I'd never seen this door before. It was hidden behind a stack of old boxes, almost as if it had been deliberately concealed. The door itself was small, old, and covered in layers of dust. It didn't match the rest of the basement, which was typical for an old house. I was curious, but hesitant. Something about it felt wrong. But curiosity got the better of me, so I pulled the boxes away and slowly turned the rusty doorknob. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow hallway that seemed to stretch on forever. I hesitated, then stepped inside. The hallway was cramped, dimly lit by a single bulb that flickered faintly overhead. The air was stale, thick with the smell of something forgotten. I took a few steps forward, my heartbeat quickening, and found another door at the end of the hallway. This one was different, newer, with a shiny brass handle. I reached for the handle, but before I could turn it, I heard something behind me, a voice, soft but clear, whispering my name, Eric. I spun around, but no one was there. The hallway was empty, just as it had been when I entered. I shook my head, trying to push away the growing unease, and opened the door. What I saw on the other side sent a chill down my spine. The room was small, barely big enough to fit a single bed. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, and the floor was littered with old furniture, some broken, some covered in thick layers of dust. But it wasn't the room itself that bothered me. It was the photographs. Hundreds of them. They were pinned to the walls, each one showing a different face. Strangers, people I didn't recognize, but the faces were off. Their eyes were wide, too wide, and their smiles didn't reach their eyes. They looked forced, as if they were trying to hide something. I could feel their eyes on me, watching me as I stepped deeper into the room. I moved closer to one of the photos on the wall. The image was of a woman, standing in front of a house I didn't recognize, her smile too bright, her eyes hollow. But something in the background caught my attention there. In the distance, standing in the shadow of the trees, was a figure. It was blurry, but I could tell it was watching her, watching me. I stepped back, my mind racing. I didn't know what I was looking at, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being drawn into something I couldn't escape. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me, and the light above flickered, casting the room into darkness. I turned around, panicking, but before I could move, I heard the voice again, closer this time. "Eric." I spun around, and there, standing in the doorway, was the woman from the photograph. Her smile was wide, too wide, her eyes empty and hollow, and she was holding something in her hands, something dark and sticky. Before I could react, she took a step forward, and the door slammed shut behind her, trapping me in the room. I tried to run, but the walls seemed to close in around me, the room growing smaller and smaller with each breath. The woman stepped closer, her eyes never leaving mine. And then, in a voice that sounded like it came from the depths of hell, she whispered, "You shouldn't have found it." The room went completely dark, and all I could hear was the sound of my own breath, heavy and quick. I felt something brush against my skin, cold, wet, like fingers, and then everything went silent. I woke up hours later, lying on the floor of the room, the photographs still staring down at me. The woman was gone. The door was open, and the hallway beyond was empty. But something had changed. As I walked back up to the main house, I noticed something strange. The photographs in the hallway, the ones I had passed before, were different. They all showed faces I had never seen before. But one thing remained the same: the eyes. They were all watching me, just like the ones in the room, and I could hear her voice, faint but clear in the back of my mind. "You shouldn't have found it." My name is Ava, and I've always loved the quiet of old houses. There's something about their creaking floors and dusty corners that feels safe to me, comforting even. That was before I moved into this house. Now, I'm not so sure. It was a small, cottage-style home on the outskirts of town, nestled in a quiet neighborhood. It was exactly what I was looking for: peaceful, secluded, with a charm that seemed to make the world outside disappear. But something wasn't right. I first noticed it on the second night after I moved in. It was late, around 2 a.m., and I was drifting off to sleep when I heard it. A faint sound, like a whispering voice, coming from beneath the floorboards. At first, I thought it was just the house settling, but the whispers, they were too distinct, too urgent. I sat up in bed, straining to hear. The voice was soft, almost a hum, but unmistakable. It seemed to be coming from the area near the fireplace, where the floorboards creaked the most. I pushed the covers off and walked cautiously towards the sound. The room was cold, and as I stood there, listening, I could feel the air growing heavier, thicker. The whispering grew louder, more insistent. It wasn't just one voice anymore. It was multiple, overlapping, like a chorus of hushed tones, pleading, begging, warning. I knelt down by the fireplace, my heart racing, and touched the floor. It felt colder than the rest of the house, almost icy. I pressed my ear to the floorboards, trying to make out what the voices were saying, but the words were muffled, indistinguishable. Suddenly, the whispers stopped. Absolute silence. I pulled away, my breath coming out in quick, shallow bursts, trying to make sense of what I just experienced. My mind raced, but before I could react, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of something moving underneath the floor. A scraping sound, as if something was trying to push its way through. I jumped back, my body frozen in place, and that's when I saw it. A small crack had appeared in one of the floorboards. It wasn't there before. I had checked earlier, when I moved in, and everything had seemed fine. But now, there it was, an open gap, just big enough for something to fit through. Against my better judgment, I grabbed a screwdriver from the toolbox and pried the board up. The moment I removed it, the air in the room shifted. The temperature dropped drastically, and the whispering started again, this time louder, clearer. It was as if something was desperate to get out. I leaned forward, peering into the dark space beneath the floor. The shadows were thick, impenetrable. And then, from the darkness, something shifted. A shape, a hand reached out from the shadows, long fingers curling as if beckoning me closer. I staggered back, my pulse pounding in my ears. My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest as I scrambled to my feet and backed away from the hole. And then, I saw the eyes. Two glowing red orbs, staring up at me from the depths of the darkness. They blinked slowly, unblinking, until I couldn't look away. My body froze, as if those eyes had me under some sort of spell, drawing me in. "Help us," the voices whispered. "Help us before it's too late." I tried to move, but my legs wouldn't obey. I couldn't speak, couldn't scream, couldn't run. All I could do was stare into those eyes. The whispers became louder, frantic. The floor began to rumble, as if something was trying to escape, trying to break through. I broke free of the trance, finally managing to stumble backward, my heart thumping in my chest. I slammed the board back into place and bolted from the room. I locked the door behind me, my breath ragged, and pressed my back against the wall, struggling to process what had just happened. The whispers didn't stop. They followed me, echoing, in the corners of the house. Even with all the doors closed, with all the windows shut tight, I could hear them. They were inside my head now, not just under the floor. Every night since then, the whispers have come back. They never stop, and every time I try to sleep, I hear them, louder, clearer, like they're growing impatient. They want something. I don't know what, but I'm scared to find out. The only thing I know for sure is this: whatever is under the floor, whatever is trapped down there, is still waiting, and it won't stop until it gets what it wants. My name is Jack, and I've lived in this neighborhood for as long as I can remember. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and the houses are all so close together. You can't help but notice when something's off. My next-door neighbor, Mrs. Whitaker, is an elderly woman who's been living here for decades. I've always waved at her when I saw her tending to her garden, though we never really spoke much. She had a lot of roses, more than anyone I've ever seen, and every spring, the entire yard would be filled with their sweet, fragrant smell. But that all changed about 6 months ago. I remember it clearly. I had just gotten home from work and was pulling into my driveway when I noticed the smell. It wasn't the sweet scent of roses that usually filled the air. No, this was something much darker. It smelled almost rotting, like something dead, decaying under the weight of time. I looked over at Mrs. Whitaker's house. Her roses were still there, but they were wilting. The garden was overrun with weeds, and the house itself looked a little more worn than usual. But what caught my attention the most was the figure standing near the fence. Mrs. Whitaker was there, or at least, it looked like her. Her face was pale, almost gray, and her hands were trembling as she pruned the roses. I could see her lips moving, but there was no sound. I didn't think much of it. Maybe she was just getting old, losing her touch. But the smell, it lingered, and it didn't go away. The next day, I woke up to the same stench, stronger this time. I could smell it from inside my house, even with all the windows shut. It felt like it was seeping through the walls, getting into my clothes, my skin. I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to check on Mrs. Whitaker. So, I knocked on her door. No answer. I knocked again, a little louder this time. Still nothing. I pushed the door open, and a wave of that foul smell hit me like a brick. The house was dark, except for a faint light coming from the back. I walked through the living room, my shoes sticking to the floor, and found myself standing at the back door. I opened it slowly, and there she was, Mrs. Whitaker, standing in the middle of her garden, her back to me. But this time, there was something wrong. Her clothes were torn, and her skin was stretched tight over her bones, almost as if she was too thin. Her hair was falling out in patches, and her face was a mask of something far worse than old age. "Mrs. Whitaker," I called out, but she didn't respond. I took a step forward, my heart pounding in my chest. That's when I noticed the roses. They weren't roses anymore. The petals were black, curled in on themselves like dead things, and the stems, they were moving, twisting and writhing like they had a life of their own. I took another step closer, my breath coming in shallow gasps, and that's when I saw it. In her hands, she was holding a rose, but not just any rose. This one was different. Its petals were deep red, almost glowing in the dim light. And as she raised it to her nose, she smiled. "Do you smell it?" she whispered, her voice raspy and cracked. I froze. The smile on her face wasn't one of joy or contentment. It was a smile that sent a chill down my spine, a smile that was wrong in every sense of the word. I turned to run, but before I could move, I felt something grab my wrist. I looked down to see a vine, thick and black, wrapped around my arm, pulling me closer. The smell of roses overwhelmed me, suffocating me as I struggled to break free. I could hear her laughing softly, a low, unsettling sound that made my skin crawl, and then I saw it. In the center of her garden, there was a patch of ground that had been torn up, freshly dug. The soil was wet, and in the middle, there was a small wooden box, and beside it, a body wrapped in tattered clothes, the face hidden in shadows, but I could tell who it was. It was her husband, the one she had buried years ago, the one everyone thought had disappeared. "You smell it now, don't you?" she whispered, pulling me closer. "The roses have always been here. They just needed time to grow." And in that moment, I realized the truth. The roses weren't just plants. They were something far darker. And Mrs. Whitaker, she wasn't what she seemed. The last thing I remember before everything went black was her eyes wide, glowing, with that same twisted smile. "My name is Ben. I'm a simple guy, just trying to live my life in peace. I moved into this neighborhood about a year ago, and it's been quiet, for the most part. Nothing too strange. But then, there's Mr. Harris. Mr. Harris lives in the house, across the street, the one with the peeling paint and overgrown garden. He's been here longer than I've been alive, but he's always been the quiet type. I've never actually spoken to him, though I've seen him walking around the yard, doing odd jobs, always keeping to himself. At first, I didn't think much of it. But then, I started noticing something. It was the window. Every night, without fail, I would glance across the street, and there he would be, standing at the window. He never moved, just stood there, staring out into the darkness. His face was always in the shadow, but I could tell he was looking directly at me. I tried to ignore it at first, thinking maybe I was just being paranoid, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger every night. The strangest part, his lights were never on. The house was always dark. So how was he seeing me? How was he standing there, perfectly still, as if he knew exactly where I was? One night, I decided to confront it. I told myself I was just overthinking things, that there was no harm in it. So, I walked across the street, slowly, my feet dragging along the damp pavement. The wind howled through the trees, making the night feel colder than usual. I knocked on his door. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. Just as I was about to turn and leave, I heard a faint sound from inside, a scraping noise, like furniture being moved. I hesitated, then pushed the door open. The hinges creaked in protest, and the door swung inward, revealing the dark interior of the house. The air smelled musty, like it hadn't been aired in years. "Mr. Harris," I called out, my voice shaky. Nothing. I took a step inside, then another. The house was eerily still. There were no signs of life, no sounds, no movement. But then, I saw it. The window, it was open, just a crack. I approached cautiously, my eyes never leaving it. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the weight of the silence pressing down on me. And then I saw it, his face. He was standing behind the glass, just like before, staring directly at me. His eyes were wide, almost too wide, as if they didn't fit his face. His skin was pale, sickly even, and his mouth was stretched into an unnatural grin. I froze, my body refusing to move. And then, he whispered, "Don't come any closer." The voice was soft, but it was unmistakable. It came from the other side of the glass, as if he was right there with me. I took a step back, my heart racing. But before I could turn around and run, something caught my eye. On the windowsill, right where his hands had been pressed against the glass, I saw something dark and sticky. Blood. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my own feet. I ran out of the house, slamming the door behind me. My hands were shaking, and I couldn't catch my breath. I don't know what happened to Mr. Harris. I don't know if he was ever real, or if he was just some twisted manifestation of my fear. But I do know one thing. Every night, when the wind picks up and the darkness presses in, I still see him, standing at that window, watching me, and I can't shake the feeling that one day, he's going to step out of the house. And when he does, he won't be alone. My name is Emily, and I've always considered myself a curious person. Some might even call it nosy. It's not that I invade people's privacy on purpose, but I enjoy knowing what's going on around me. It's the little things that catch my attention, the subtle details that others might miss. I moved into the house next to the Johnsons about 3 months ago. They had been living there for years, a quiet couple at least. That's what I thought. The house next door was a bit older, a bit worn down, but I didn't mind. The neighborhood was peaceful, and that's all I needed at first. Everything seemed normal. Mrs. Johnson would wave at me when she was watering her plants, and Mr. Johnson would give a polite nod whenever I walked past. But there was something about their house that always made me uneasy. It was a feeling I couldn't quite shake, like something was off. It started with the sounds. At night, I began hearing strange noises coming from their house. It wasn't always loud, just a soft creaking, like the house was shifting. But it wasn't normal. The house was sturdy. There shouldn't have been creaks and groans like that. Sometimes, I would hear whispers too, faint and indistinct, like someone was talking in the next room, or the walls. I told myself it was just my imagination. Maybe it was the house settling, or maybe it was the wind. But as the days passed, the noises became harder to ignore. One night around midnight, I couldn't take it anymore. The whispers had turned into a low, persistent muttering, and I could swear I heard footsteps moving around inside. I grabbed my phone and texted Mrs. Johnson, "Everything okay? I hear strange sounds coming from your house." The response came almost immediately. "Everything's fine, dear. Just the house making noises. Don't worry." But that didn't sit right with me. The tone of her message was too calm, too rehearsed. It was as if she knew exactly what I was talking about, yet didn't want to acknowledge it. The next night, I couldn't resist. I decided to investigate. I went over to their house, my heart pounding in my chest. The door was slightly ajar. I knocked softly, but there was no answer. The air around me felt thick, as if the house was holding its breath. I pushed the door open, just a little. That's when I saw it. In the hallway, behind a cracked door, there was a shadow, a figure, standing still, watching me. It wasn't a person, not exactly. It was more like a shape, a dark, shapeless mass that seemed to stretch and move without making a sound. My breath caught in my throat as I stood frozen, staring at it. Then, the whispering began again, but this time, it was clearer. The voice was coming from inside the shadow. "Get out," it hissed. I stumbled back, my legs giving out beneath me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My mind screamed at me to run, but my feet were glued to the spot. And then, the door slammed. I bolted. I didn't stop until I was back in my own house, heart racing, hands shaking. I locked every door and window, hoping the night would pass without anything else happening. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it was a dream, that I had imagined it. But when I looked out my window, the Johnson's house was as quiet as ever. No signs of life. Nothing moved. It was as if nothing had happened at all. That was until a few days later. I was outside in my yard when I saw Mrs. Johnson walking past my house. She didn't wave. She didn't even look at me, but there was something different about her. Her eyes were wide, vacant, like she wasn't really seeing anything. And then, I saw it, just behind her, in the shadows of the porch, a shape, a figure, just like the one I had seen the night before, watching me. But this time, it wasn't hiding. It was standing there, clearly visible, its dark form towering over her. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, but the words wouldn't come. Mrs. Johnson turned her head slightly, and for the first time, she looked at me. But there was no recognition in her eyes, no warmth, only emptiness. "Get out," she whispered, and I realized, in that moment, that I wasn't just hearing the voice of the shadow. I was hearing it from them. I never really paid much attention to the house next door. It was an ordinary place, a small rundown cottage that had been vacant for as long as I could remember. My name is Alex, and I've lived in this neighborhood for over a decade. I knew everyone around here, or at least, I thought I did. That was until the new neighbor moved in. It was a rainy evening when I first noticed the moving truck outside. I was on the porch, having a smoke, and saw the man unloading boxes. He wasn't someone I'd seen around before. Tall with dark hair, he seemed a bit off. I can't explain why, but there was something unsettling about him. The way he moved, the way his eyes darted around, always scanning, always searching. He didn't even acknowledge me as I watched him from my porch. The first few days were quiet. The blinds in his house were always closed, and I never heard much from inside. I figured it was just a lonely guy, someone who preferred solitude. But then, strange things started happening. It was on the fourth night when I first heard it. The knocking. At first, I thought it was the wind, but as the nights went on, I realized it wasn't. It was a rhythmic knocking, as if someone was pounding on the walls of his house. No, not just pounding. It sounded like someone was trapped inside, desperately trying to get out. I couldn't ignore it any longer. On the seventh night, I decided to confront him. I walked across the lawn, feeling the chill of the wind on my neck. When I knocked on his door, he opened it almost immediately, like he'd been waiting for me. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice smooth, almost too smooth. His smile was forced, and his eyes didn't quite match it. There was something cold behind them. I live next door," I stammered. "I just wanted to ask about the noise. Are you okay in there?" He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, with a quiet laugh, he shook his head. "You must be hearing things. I haven't made any noise, but I could feel the tension in the air. It was like the walls of his house were closing in on me, suffocating me with a strange, heavy presence." I left quickly, my heart racing. As I walked back to my house, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me. I glanced over my shoulder and caught a glimpse of him through the window, standing still. staring directly at me. The knocking continued every night after that, each time louder and more frantic. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think straight. Then, one morning, I woke up to find something strange in my yard. A box, a small wooden box. It was buried halfway in the soil near my fence. I didn't know how it got there, but it didn't. Looked like something that belonged to me. I opened it. Inside, there was a single old photograph. It was of my family, taken from my window. But that wasn't what scared me. What frightened me was the figure standing behind us in the photo. The same man, my neighbor. I looked up from the box, my breath caught in my throat. The knock echoed again from his house, but this time it was followed by a voice. "Come over, Alex. I have something to show you." It wasn't an invitation. It was a command. I didn't go. Instead, I called the police. But when they arrived, there was no sign of anything. No man, no truck, no boxers. The house next door was just as abandoned as it had always been. The only thing that remained was the box, and now, every night, I still hear the knocking. And sometimes, I feel eyes on me, watching from the shadows. My name is Lucas Bennett, and I never believed in ghosts until I moved into this house. It wasn't an extravagant place, just a modest cottage nestled in a quiet suburban neighborhood. When I first saw it, I was drawn to the charm of the old, weathered walls and the lush greenery surrounding the house. The perfect spot for a fresh start. The previous owner had moved out after his family had grown up and left, so the house was empty and waiting for someone new. I thought it would be the ideal place to settle in and get away from the chaos of city life. The first few weeks were peaceful. I spent most of my time settling in, painting the walls, and rearranging furniture. But soon, something strange started happening. At night, when I was alone in the house, I began hearing soft whispers. At first, I thought it was just the house settling, creaking floorboards, the wind through the old windows. But the whispers grew louder, and they weren't coming from the outside. They seemed to be coming from the walls themselves. I tried to ignore it, dismissing it as my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. One evening, as I was sitting in the living room reading, I heard the whispering again, but this time, it was clearer. It was as though someone was speaking directly into my ear, but when I turned around, no one was there. The whispers continued, growing more insistent, more urgent. It was like the walls were trying to communicate something to me. I began to feel a presence in the house, something that wasn't human. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to find the source of the whispers. I walked through the house, pressing my ear against the walls, trying to locate the exact spot where the sound was coming from. It led me to a small door under the staircase, a door I had never noticed before. It was old and weathered, with peeling paint and rusty hinges. The door was locked, but the whispers seemed to be coming from behind it. I didn't know what to do, but curiosity got the better of me. I found a crowbar in the garage and pried the door open. The room inside was small, barely big enough for me to stand up straight. It was dark, the only light coming from a small window high up on the wall. The air inside was thick with dust, and the floor creaked as I stepped in. But there was something else in the room, something that made my skin crawl. The walls were covered in strange markings and balls, scratches, and drawings that seemed to shift in the dim light. As I stepped deeper into the room, I could hear the whispers growing louder, more frantic. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable, desperate, pleading, and terrified. I turned to leave, but as I did, I felt a cold hand brush against my shoulder. My heart raced, and I spun around, but there was nothing there. The whispers turned into a single word, repeated over and over again. Leave. I couldn't understand what was happening, but I knew I had to get out of there. I bolted out of the room and slammed the door shut behind me. The whispers stopped immediately, and for a moment, I felt a strange calm. But that calm didn't last long. Over the following days, the whispers grew louder, and the house felt colder, more oppressive. I began to see things out of the corner of my eye, shadows moving in the dark, shapes in the mirror that weren't my own. It was as though the house itself was alive, watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake. One night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. I crept out of bed, my heart pounding in my chest. When I reached the hallway, I saw a figure standing in the darkness. It was tall, with long flowing hair, its face hidden in the shadows. I couldn't move, frozen in place by fear. The figure turned slowly, and for a brief moment, I saw its face. It was pale, gaunt, with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce right through me. The figure opened its mouth, and the whispers flooded my ears, louder than ever. Leave, ... or we will take you. I ran from the house that night, never looking back. I don't know what was in those walls, but I know one thing for sure. Something dark, something ancient, was calling me, and if I hadn't left when I did, I might have been the next one to disappear. So now, I live somewhere else, far away from that house. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still hear the whispers, and I know they're not done with me. My name is Noah Parker. I've always been a bit of a skeptic, someone who doesn't believe in the supernatural. But after moving into this house, my beliefs were put to the test. It wasn't a grand house, just a modest 2-story with a quaint backyard. It had been on the market for a while, and I was able to get it for a good price. The previous owner had passed away, and the house had been empty for months. I didn't mind. I liked the idea of living in a place with a little history. Something about it felt welcoming. The first few days were calm. I unpacked, settled in, and explored the house. Everything seemed normal except for one strange thing. There was a room in the house that didn't appear on any of the floor plans. I had gone upstairs to check out the bedrooms when I noticed a small door at the end of the hallway. It was tucked away, almost hidden by the wall, and it was slightly ajar. Curious. I opened it. What I found was a small, dimly lit room. It was empty, except for an old armchair in the center, facing the wall. The room was so small that it barely seemed to fit the dimensions of the house. But what really caught my attention was the odd feeling that came over me as I stood there. A chill in the air, a sense of unease I couldn't shake. I left the room and shut the door behind me, but I couldn't get it out of my mind. There was something off about that room, something that didn't belong. Over the next few days, I kept hearing strange noises coming from that room. At night, when I was trying to sleep, I would hear faint scratching sounds, like nails dragging against the floor. I assumed it was just the house settling, but it became harder to ignore. The noises grew louder, more distinct. It almost sounded like something or someone was inside that room, trying to get out. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to investigate. I opened the door to the mysterious room, but this time, something was different. The room was no longer empty. The chair was turned around, facing me, as though it was waiting for me to sit. The air was thick, almost suffocating. I stepped inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The scratching noises stopped. It was as if the room itself was holding its breath. Then, I saw it. There was something on the wall, something I hadn't noticed before. It was a small, barely visible crack, running down the center of the wall. It seemed out of place, like the wall had been repaired and then painted over. But the crack was still there. I touched it. The moment my fingers made contact, the wall shuddered, and the door slammed shut behind me. Panic surged through me as I tried to turn the handle, but it wouldn't budge. I was trapped in the room. The air grew colder, and I could hear a low, guttural whisper coming from behind the wall. Suddenly, the crack in the wall began to widen, and someone began to emerge. A pale, emaciated hand reached through the crack, followed by an arm, then a whole figure. A woman, Her skin stretched tight over her bones. Her eyes, black and lifeless, emerged from the wall. She didn't speak, but her presence was overwhelming. I could feel her hatred, her anger radiating from her like an intense heat. I stumbled back, but there was nowhere to go. She took a step toward me, her eyes locked on mine. I could hear her breathing, shallow and raspy. In that moment, I knew I had to get out. I slammed my shoulder against the door, desperately trying to break it open. After what felt like an eternity, the door finally gave way, and I ran out of the room, slamming it shut behind me. I never went back into that room. I don't know what it was, or who that woman was, but I could feel her in the house, always watching, always waiting. I tried to leave, but every time I tried to pack up, I couldn't bring myself to walk away from the house. It was as though something was keeping me there, so I stay. But I never go near that room. I don't know what lies behind the wall, but I know one thing for sure. I never want to find out. My name is Emma Carter. I had spent years renting apartments in the city, always feeling like I was just passing through, never really at home. So, when I found this old house on the outskirts of town, I thought it was the perfect opportunity to settle down. The price was right, and the house had character, an old farmhouse, with a weathered facade and a large backyard. I could already picture myself gardening, reading in the sun, and finally putting down roots. The first few weeks were blissful. The quiet of the countryside was a welcome change from the constant hum of the city. I spent my days unpacking and making the house my own. But then, I found the mirror. It was an antique, standing full-length mirror, tucked away in the attic. The frame was ornate, carved with intricate designs of flowers and vines. It seemed out of place in the dusty attic, but I couldn't resist bringing it down. I cleaned it off and hung it in the hallway near the stairs. It added a touch of elegance to the house. At first, everything seemed fine. But then, I began to notice strange things in the reflection. It wasn't always noticeable, but sometimes, when I walked past the mirror, I could swear I saw someone moving in the background. A figure, just out of focus, standing there. But when I turned around, there was nothing there. It happened again, and each time, I dismissed it as my imagination playing tricks on me. Then, one evening, as I was getting ready for bed, I passed the mirror and froze. The figure was there again, but this time it was clearer. A woman with long dark hair, standing in the hallway behind me. Her eyes were fixed on me, but her face was blank, expressionless, like a mannequin. I spun around quickly, but there was no one there. I was shaken, but I convinced myself it was just a trick of the light, a distortion in the glass. I tried to forget about it. But the next night, the figure returned. This time, the woman was standing in the mirror as I walked past. Only her reflection wasn't exactly the same as mine. She was standing at an odd angle, like she wasn't matching my movements. I looked into her eyes, and for a brief moment, I saw something that made my blood run cold, pure malice. It was as if she was waiting for me, watching me, wanting something. I couldn't take it anymore. I moved the mirror out of the hallway and into the guest room, hoping that would stop whatever was happening. But the moment I turned the mirror around and set it down, I felt a chill in the room. That night, I locked the door to the guest room and went to bed, hoping to put the strange happenings behind me. But I woke up in the middle of the night, hearing soft whispers, like voices coming from the other side of the door. I opened my eyes, and there she was, the woman from the mirror, standing at the foot of my bed. Her face was now more detailed, more real, and her eyes were full of rage. She took a step toward me, and I felt a cold, suffocating presence fill the room. I screamed and ran from the room, slamming the door behind me. I didn't know what to do, where to go. I tried to call a friend, but my phone wouldn't work. The signal was dead. I felt trapped, isolated, as though something had taken hold of the house. The next morning, I packed my things and left, not even stopping to look at the mirror. I haven't been back since. I don't know who or what was in that mirror, but I know it wasn't just a reflection. I don't know if it was the house or something else, but whatever it was, it followed me. So, if you ever find an old mirror, don't hang it in your home, because sometimes the reflection you see isn't just your own. My name is Kevin Thomas, and I moved into this house alone. I had been looking for a place to start over, somewhere quiet, away from the hustle and bustle of my previous life. A fresh beginning. When I found this house, nestled on the edge of town, I knew it was perfect. It had that vintage charm, with wooden floors, a grand staircase, and an old-fashioned fireplace. It was everything I needed. The first week was uneventful. I unpacked, settled in, and began adjusting to the quiet, solitude. But soon, I began to notice small things I couldn't explain. It started with the lights. Sometimes, they would flicker for no reason, only to go back to normal after a few moments. I thought it was an issue with the wiring, but when I had an electrician come in, he found nothing wrong. The lights worked fine, and the house seemed to be in perfect condition. Then came the footsteps. At first, I thought it was just the house settling, the creaks of old wood moving with the change in temperature. But as time passed, the footsteps became more distinct, steady, deliberate, as though someone was walking through the house when I wasn't there. I'd hear them late at night, just as I was about to fall asleep. Heavy steps, dragging across the floor. I wasn't sure if I was imagining it, but I started to lock my bedroom door at night. It didn't help. One evening, after hearing the footsteps again, I decided to investigate. I walked through the house, checking every room. Everything was in place, just as I'd left it. But as I reached the basement door, I stopped. The door was slightly ajar. It had been closed when I went upstairs earlier, but now it was cracked open, just enough to allow a sliver of darkness to seep through. I stepped forward, heart racing. Something was in the basement. I descended the stairs slowly, feeling the chill in the air grow thicker as I reached the bottom. The space was small, cramped, and dimly lit. I could hear the faint sound of breathing, as though someone was just out of sight. I moved deeper into the basement, my steps echoing in the silence, and then I saw it. A figure, standing in the far corner. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but as I stepped closer, I could see it clearly. An old man, hunched over, his hands pressed against the walls, as if he was trying to hold himself up. I froze, staring at him. His face was pale, gaunt, and he had an unsettling, vacant expression. He didn't move, didn't acknowledge me, but I could feel his eyes on me, even though I couldn't see them. I tried to speak, but my throat went dry. I turned and ran up the stairs, slamming the basement door behind me. My heart was pounding in my chest. That night, I locked every door in the house and stayed awake, listening for any sounds. The footsteps didn't come. The house was quiet, but when I woke up the next morning, I found something strange. On the kitchen table, there was a note. It was written in a shaky hand, the ink smudged as though the writer had been trembling. The note simply read, "You're not alone." I never went back into the basement. I left the house that day, and I never looked back. I don't know who or what was living there with me, but I do know one thing. The house wasn't empty. There was someone or something lurking in the shadows. If you ever move into a new place, always check the basement, because sometimes the unseen tenant never leaves. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I thought I was getting a fresh start. I bought this old house out of town, hoping for peace and quiet. The city had become too noisy, too chaotic. I longed for the solitude and charm that the countryside offered. So, when I found the house on Pine Hill Road, I knew it was perfect. It wasn't a new house by any means, more like an antique with some modern touches. It was beautiful in its own way, with a wraparound porch and ivy crawling up the walls. The inside had old hardwood floors that creaked beneath my feet, and high ceilings that made everything feel grand. I could already imagine the cozy evenings in front of the fireplace, but there was something off about it. The first few nights were fine, just the usual settling sounds. But then I began hearing noises at odd hours, scratching sounds, like something was moving inside the walls. It wasn't a mouse, I was sure of that. It sounded like something ... larger, but I dismissed it, thinking it was just an old house doing its thing. Then came the locked room. I found it on the second floor, hidden behind a bookshelf that was attached to the wall. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was just an old storage room, but when I tried to open the door, I found it was locked. The key wasn't in the house, and there didn't seem to be any way to get inside. The strange thing was, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I passed that bookshelf, I felt drawn to it, like something was calling me. And every night, the scratching grew louder, more desperate. It seemed to come from behind that locked door. I couldn't understand why, but something told me that whatever was behind that door was the source of the noise. I tried everything I could think of to get inside. I called a locksmith, but he couldn't pick the lock. The door had no handle, only a keyhole. It was as if the room had been sealed off intentionally. The more I thought about it, the more I felt like the house was hiding something dangerous. Then, one night, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I found a crowbar in the garage and pried open the door. The hinges screamed as I forced the door open, and when it finally gave way, I stepped inside. The room was empty, completely bare, except for a small, dusty chair in the corner. The air was thick with dust, and the floor creaked beneath my feet. But it wasn't the emptiness of the room that made my skin crawl. It was the overwhelming sense of being watched. As I stood there, I realized something was wrong. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, they were covered in strange symbols, scratched into the surface like someone had been trying to carve something into the very structure of the house. But the most unsettling part was the chair. It was facing the corner, as if it had been placed there for someone or something to sit in. Suddenly, the scratching noise started again, louder than ever. It was coming from behind me. I turned around, but there was nothing there. That's when I saw it. In the mirror, on the wall, I saw the figure, a man, sitting in the chair, his face obscured by darkness. His presence was suffocating, and I could feel my heart racing. I tried to move, but my feet were frozen to the floor. The man in the mirror slowly turned his head, and in a voice that was not his own, he whispered, "You shouldn't have opened the door." I screamed and ran out of the room, slamming the door behind me. The mirror fell to the floor with a crash, but when I looked back, the man was gone. I left the house that night and haven't been back since. I don't know what was behind that door, but I know it wasn't just the house. Whatever it was waiting for me to open that door. And now, it's out there, somewhere, watching. If you ever find yourself in a house with a locked room, don't open it. Some things are meant to stay hidden. I'm Michael Davis, and I moved into this house a month ago. It wasn't my first choice, but it was a deal I couldn't pass up. It's a beautiful old house on the outskirts of town, with tall windows and a grand staircase that makes you feel like you're walking into another era. The price was too good to be true, but I told myself it was just because it had been sitting empty for so long. Who wouldn't want to get rid of a house like this? I'm not the superstitious type. I don't believe in ghosts, spirits, or anything of the sort. I'm a man of science, after all. But the longer I stay here, the more I can't ignore the strange things happening. It started with the mirrors. At first it was just a strange feeling whenever I passed one. A slight chill, a sense that something was off. But I brushed it off. Old houses have drafts, after all. But then I noticed something more disturbing. I'd catch glimpses of Something in the mirrors that wasn't there when I looked directly at them. A shadow in the corner, a figure standing just behind me, barely visible in the reflection. I'd turn around quickly, but the room would always be empty. I thought I was just tired, that my mind was playing tricks on me, but the reflections started getting more vivid. One evening, as I was getting ready to go to bed, I saw the figure again. This time it was clearer, man, dressed in old-fashioned clothing, standing just behind me in the mirror. I froze. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, staring at me with hollow eyes. I turned around. No one was there. Panic set in, but I told myself it was nothing, just a trick of the light, a figment of my imagination. But the next day, I saw him again, this time in the hallway mirror, and the day after that, he appeared in the reflection of the glass door. I began to notice patterns. The figure would only appear when I was alone, always in a different mirror. The more I tried to avoid them, the more persistent they became. At night, I could hear faint footsteps echoing through the house, but whenever I checked, the mirrors were always cold and still. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I was at my breaking point. I grabbed a hammer from the garage and began smashing every mirror in the house, one by one, desperate to rid myself of whatever was haunting me. But when I reached the last mirror, the one in the living room, I hesitated. As I raised the hammer, I saw him again. This time, he wasn't just in the reflection, he was standing right in front of me, staring into my eyes. His face was pale, his features distorted, as if he was rotting away in front of me. His mouth opened, and for the first time, he spoke. "You can't escape," he whispered, his voice a cold, rasping sound that sent a wave of terror through me. I dropped the hammer and backed away, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the reflection. The man in the mirror smiled, and then slowly, his face twisted into something grotesque, his eyes hollowing out as if he was being consumed by the darkness. I ran out of the house that night, leaving everything behind. I don't know who or what that figure was, but I've never returned to that house. I don't know if it's the house that's cursed, or if something followed me, but I'm not taking any chances. If you ever hear about a house on the outskirts of town, an old, crumbling mansion with mirrors that seem to look back at you, don't go. Trust me, you don't want to meet the man in the reflection. I'm Emily Carter, and I should have known better than to trust the real estate agent. The house on Crestwood Avenue looked perfect on the outside, well kept, charming, and with more space than I ever thought I'd need. The price was right, and the neighborhood was quiet. It seemed like the ideal place for a fresh start, but from the moment I moved in, things felt wrong. At first, it was small things. The creaking of the floorboards when no one was walking on them, the soft rustling sounds I couldn't explain. I chalked it up to the house being old, figuring the sounds were just part of its character. But then it started getting worse. The first night I spent there, I heard whispers. I thought I was dreaming, but the next night, they came again, faint, almost unintelligible voices, murmuring from inside the walls. I tried to ignore it, but the voices grew louder, clearer. They were always just out of reach, like someone was speaking through a thick wall, and I couldn't understand what they were saying. I told myself it was nothing, just the house settling, or maybe the pipes. But then I started noticing something more unsettling. Every night, the whispers seemed to come from different parts of the house. One night, they'd be in the kitchen. The next, they'd be in the living room, or even in the walls of my bedroom. And always, they were just loud enough to make me uneasy, but never clear enough to make sense of. I called a contractor to check for any issues with the house. Might be old pipes or a draft, he said, dismissing my concerns with a shrug. But when he left, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The house was too quiet, too still. I didn't want to admit it, but I was starting to feel like I wasn't alone. One evening I decided to confront the voices. I grabbed a flashlight and started walking through the house, trying to follow the sound. The whispers led me upstairs, down the narrow hallway, and to a small door at the end. I had never noticed it before. It was tucked away, almost hidden behind an old bookshelf. The door was old, covered in dust, and had a strange, almost ominous feel to it. I hesitated. The whispers were louder now, almost frantic, urging me to open the door. My heart raced as I reached for the handle. The door creaked open, and I stepped inside. The room was small, empty, except for a few old crates and boxers. But as I shined my flashlight around, I noticed something strange. One of the walls seemed newer than the rest. It was smoother, more polished. I walked over to it, running my fingers along the surface. That's when I found the small, hidden door embedded in the wall. The whispers grew louder now, almost deafening, as if the voices were right beside me. I didn't know what I expected, but I felt a sudden compulsion to open it. With shaking hands, I twisted the knob. The door swung open, and a rush of cold air hit me, along with a smell I couldn't place, damp, musty, like something had been locked away for years. Inside, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, in the center of the room, was a wooden chest, covered in layers of dust and cobwebs. But it wasn't the chest that terrified me, it was the sight of something moving inside it. Something ... alive. Before I could react, the whispers stopped. The silence was unbearable. I could feel something watching me, but when I looked back at the chest, it was empty. I ran from the room, slamming the door shut behind me. But even now, I can hear the whispers sometimes, faint and distant, like they're waiting for me to come back, to open that door again. But I won't. Not ever again. My name is Jack Donovan, and I've always been someone who likes to understand things. I'm a man of logic, a problem solver, and I've never been one to shy away from a challenge. So when I bought the old house on Willow Lane, I figured I'd be able to fix it up without issue. It was big, old, and full of character, just what I was looking for. The house had been vacant for years, but the price was right, and I was determined to make it my own. The previous owner had left it in disarray, but it had potential. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. It wasn't long after I moved in that I noticed something odd. The house seemed to have a room that didn't exist. Or rather, a room that was never meant to be opened. I first discovered it while exploring the basement. Behind an old wooden shelf, there was a door I hadn't seen before. It was locked, but the lock was old and rusted, as though it hadn't been touched in years. I found the key a few days later, buried in a drawer of the kitchen. It seemed too convenient, too easy. But curiosity got the better of me, and I knew I had to open it. The door creaked as I turned the key and pushed it open. The room inside was small, almost claustrophobic. It was bare, except for a single chair in the middle of the floor and a small table against the wall. There was no light, but the air felt thick, like it had been sealed off from the rest of the house for a long time. A chill ran down my spine, but I couldn't help myself. I stepped inside. That's when I saw it. Scrawled on the walls, in what looked like dried blood, were words: "Leave before it sees you." I backed out of the room quickly, heart pounding, and slammed the door shut. I didn't know what to think. Was it just some sick joke? Someone's idea of a prank? But deep down, I knew it. WASN, single quotes T. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I would hear footsteps behind me when no one was there, or catch glimpses of shadows moving out of the corner of my eye. I thought I was just imagining things, but the feeling persisted. One night, I couldn't take it any longer. I had to know. What was in that room? I waited until the dead of night, when everything was quiet. The key felt cold in my hand as I approached the locked door again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I turned the key, and the door opened with a sickening creak. The room was exactly as I remembered it. But something was different now. The chair was overturned, the table moved slightly, and on the walls, more words had appeared. Too late. It knows you're here. My stomach churned. I knew I shouldn't go in, but the door was open, and the pull of whatever was inside was too strong. I stepped in once more, and that's when I saw it. The room wasn't empty. There was something in the chair. It was a man, or at least, it looked like one. His face was obscured by long, black hair, but I could feel his eyes on me, piercing through the darkness. His hands were resting on his lap, fingers twitching, as if waiting for something, or someone. I took a step back, but before I could move, the door slammed shut behind me, trapping me in the room. Leave, before it sees you, the voice said, but it wasn't from the man in the chair. It was coming from the walls, the floor, the ceiling. It echoed in my mind. I tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. The air grew colder, the darkness heavier. I could feel it closing in on me. That's when I realized there was no escape. The house had claimed me, and it was never going to let me go. My name is Ethan Parker, and I should have known better. When my wife, Clara, and I bought the house on the outskirts of town, we thought it would be the perfect place to start our new life. It was quiet, secluded, and surrounded by trees. What we both wanted after years of city noise. But something felt off from the very first night. I remember unpacking boxes, the smell of fresh paint still lingering in the air. Clara was setting up the living room, and I was trying to figure out where to put our bookshelves. That's when I heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible whispering coming from the walls. I thought it was just the house settling, a normal sound for any old building. But as the days went on, the whispers grew louder, more distinct. I tried to ignore it, but it became impossible. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, the whispers echoing in my ears. They weren't in any language I could understand, just a series of low, guttural sounds that seemed to crawl under my skin. Clara didn't hear them. She said I was just tired from the move, that I needed to relax. But the whispers didn't stop. In fact, they seemed to follow me. The more I tried to shut them out, the more persistent they became. Then, one night, as I was lying awake, I felt a cold draft brush against my neck. I turned, expecting to see Clara asleep beside me, but the bed was empty. I didn't hear her footsteps, so I got up to check the rest of the house. When I reached the hallway, the air grew thick, as if the house itself was holding its breath. The whispers were louder now, almost deafening, coming from behind the walls. I traced them to the old wooden door at the end of the hall. It led to the basement, a place we hadn't dared explore yet. With my heart racing, I opened the door. The basement was dark, the kind of darkness that seemed to swallow everything. But there was something else down there, something I could feel, but couldn't see. A presence, lurking, waiting. I heard Clara's voice then, faint, calling my name from the bottom of the stairs. Ethan, ... come down here. I froze, unsure of whether it was her or something else. Her voice didn't sound right. It was distorted, unnatural. I stood there, torn between the urge to run and the need to make sure she was okay. The whispers grew louder, now almost like a chant. I couldn't take it anymore. I bolted down the stairs, only to find ... nothing. The basement was empty. But then, as I turned to leave, I saw it scratched into the wall, just above the stairs. "Welcome home, Ethan." I ran back upstairs, my breath shallow, panic setting in. Clara was in the living room, looking at me like nothing had happened. She hadn't moved from the spot she was in when I left. Her expression was calm, but I could see the faintest trace of something wrong in her eyes. I don't know what happened that night. I don't know what I saw or heard, but the whispers have never stopped. They're still here, following me, waiting for the day when they'll finally get me. I should have known better. Now, I can't leave. The house is my home, and it knows my name. My name is Sarah Lark, and I never believed in ghosts until I moved into this house. It was supposed to be a fresh start for me and my husband, David. We had spent years in an apartment, but we wanted more space, somewhere to grow old together. When we found the old Victorian house at the end of Elm Street, it seemed perfect. It had character, history, and a price we could afford. The owner, an elderly woman, had insisted it had been passed down through generations, and when we asked about its history, she just smiled and said, "Nothing too strange, dear." From the moment we moved in, though, things felt off. It wasn't anything I could point to specifically, but it was there. A chill in the air, the way the shadows seemed to move just a bit too quickly. The doors that would creak open on their own. David brushed it off, claiming it was just the house settling, but I wasn't so sure. One evening, after dinner, I was in the kitchen cleaning up when I heard the floorboards upstairs creak. I thought nothing of it, probably David, moving around, but then I heard it again. This time, it sounded like footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps, like someone was walking across the hallway upstairs. I called up to David. "Hey, what are you doing up there?" There was no answer. I assumed he hadn't heard me, so I went upstairs to check on him. The house was eerily quiet, and when I reached the top of the stairs, I noticed something strange. The door to the guest bedroom was slightly ajar, even though we hadn't been in there since we moved in. Curious, I pushed it open. The room was empty, save for a small desk in the corner, but something was off, something wasn't right. The air was thick, heavy, as though something had been there recently. And then, I saw it, a small, tarnished key, lying on the desk. It didn't belong to anything we owned. I picked it up and turned it over in my hand, feeling a strange pull towards it. My heart began to race as I noticed something else, a faded, handwritten note taped to the underside of the desk drawer. The writing was old, faded, and shaky, but I could make it out. "He's still here. Don't open the door." I didn't know what to think. I had never seen this note before. I hurriedly shoved the key into my pocket and went downstairs to confront David. But when I got to the living room, David wasn't there. The house was silent again, but now, the silence felt oppressive, like something was waiting. That night, the footsteps continued. They were louder now, and closer. I lay in bed, my heart thudding in my chest, unable to sleep. The noise seemed to move through the house, stopping just outside our bedroom door. It felt like someone or something was standing just on the other side, waiting. I didn't dare open the door. When morning came, David was gone. His car wasn't in the driveway, and the house was strangely empty. I called him, but he didn't pick up. Hours passed, and I started to panic. Where could he have gone? Finally, I decided to check the guest bedroom again. When I opened the door, I froze. The room was different. The desk, the key, the note, they were all gone. In their place was a single photograph of David and me, taken on our first day at the house. But there was something wrong with the photo. David's face was blurred, like it had been erased. I don't know where David is now. The only thing I know for sure is that someone, is still here. It's watching me, waiting for the right moment to strike. I don't know how long I'll last in this house, but I do know one thing. I won't be the last to live here. My name is Malcolm Cruz, and I have spent my entire adult life in the Ashford cinema. It wasn't a glamorous place, more like a forgotten relic. The carpet had stains no one talked about. The walls were peeling in places where the dim light couldn't reach, and the air always smelled faintly of old popcorn and something metallic. But Ashford had history, the kind of history that couldn't be found in any book or on any website. People talked about the theater like it was alive, like it had a soul. Rumors about things that happened after hours. Lost souls who never left. and its final screening, its last showing, was a legendary event that no one dared to speak about. I was hired as the projectionist. It wasn't exactly a dream job, but it paid the bills. The theater had one projector for all 4 screens, so things were always a bit chaotic. We had a standard lineup: romantic comedies, thrillers, a few classic horror films, but after hours, when the late night shifts rolled in, it was different. That's when the real films started. The first one was a weird little black and white short. No title, just an old reel found in the basement. The film was grainy and shaky, the kind of thing that made your eyes ache. But as I set the film into the projector and watched the screen flicker to life, I knew this wasn't just an old film, it was alive. The footage was silent at first, but slowly, eerie, distorted whispers started filling the air. It was a woman's voice, but she was speaking in a language I didn't recognize. The camera moved through what looked like a hallway, a dark, narrow corridor. It was dimly lit, and the shadows seemed to twitch, as if something was hiding just out of sight. I wanted to stop it, but I couldn't. The camera entered a room at the end of the hall, and in the center of that room a mirror, but not just any mirror. It was an old, tarnished piece of glass. The woman in the film walked toward it, her hand trembling as she reached out to touch the surface. And that's when it happened. She looked directly at me. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Her eyes, those hollow, dark eyes, felt like they were piercing through me. She whispered something I couldn't understand, but it felt like a command, a warning. And then the screen glitched. Everything went white. When the light flickered back, I was no longer in the projection booth. I was standing in that dark hallway from the film. Panic surged through me. The room felt cold, too cold. I turned around, only to find the hallway stretching infinitely. The shadows that had once seemed distant now moved closer and closer. I tried to run, but the floor seemed to shift beneath me, like I was sinking into it. I heard the whispers again, but this time, they were clear, and they were coming from behind me. Turn around. Against my better judgment, I turned. The woman from the film stood in front of me, only this time, she wasn't in the frame anymore. She was real. She was here, her face twisted in a grotesque grin, her eyes black voids that seemed to suck in all the light. "Why did you watch?" she hissed. "Why did you open it?" Suddenly, the walls of the hallway closed in on me. I was trapped, unable to move. The whispering became deafening, each voice calling my name in a way that sent shivers down my spine. "Leave now, or you'll never leave." I felt my body being pulled toward the mirror at the end of the hall. The closer I got, the more the world around me seemed to vanish. It was as if I was being swallowed by the reflection. I reached out, fingers grazing the surface. Everything went black. I woke up in the projection booth back where I started, but everything felt different. The air was heavier. The screen was blank. There was no sound. I tried to leave, but the door wouldn't open. I turned back to the screen. It flickered to life again, but this time, the film was showing my own face screaming, twisted in terror. And then, the words flashed across the screen. "The last showing begins, and never ends." That was the night I realized Ashford Cinema wasn't just haunted by ghosts. It was haunted by its own films. Films that didn't end when the reel ran out. They kept playing, looping in some twisted, eternal cycle. Every time I show a film now, I can feel it. The weight of the eyes on me, the whispers that never stop. The last showing is still running, and it's not the audience that's trapped. My name is Linnea Frost. I used to love films. That kind of love where you quote them in casual conversation, where you cry at the same scene every rewatch. That kind of love that eventually drives you to work in a place like Pennyvale Pictures, a nearly abandoned old cinema on the edge of town. It was the only job I could land after college, and from the outside, it had charm brick walls, a classic marquee, the smell of buttered popcorn, but inside, It felt ... hollow, like the soul of the building had rotted quietly over time, leaving only shadows and reels that never quite sat still. My second weekend, the projectionist Russell, a pale, jittery guy, pulled me aside. "There's a storage room behind Theater 6, he said. "Don't go in there. Not unless you want your head messed up." I laughed it off, until the night I had to close alone. Theater 6 had been empty all day, no screenings scheduled, but as I walked past it, I saw the projector light on, flickering through the window. The screen glowed dimly behind the curtains. The door wasn't even locked. Inside, the air was cold. The reel was running, though no one had loaded it. I stepped into the booth. The film wasn't labeled, just black tape across the canister. Curiosity, common sense. I watched, and I saw myself, not a scene from my life, but something that felt pulled from my mind. Me, age 10, at my parents' divorce hearing. The sound was warped, voices echoing like screams underwater. I tried to shut it off. The projector wouldn't stop. The reel shifted. Now I was 12, watching my dog die in my arms. I had never told anyone what that looked like. Never shared the exact way his eyes rolled back, or the whimper that broke me. And then I heard a whisper. Not from the speakers, from the room. "You left us here." I turned. Rows of seats filled with versions of me, each from a different year, different trauma. Some were crying. Others just stared blankly. "You recorded us," one of them hissed. "And then you forgot." I ran. But the theater stretched, the aisle infinite, screen behind me growing louder, playing more scenes. My first heartbreak, my worst mistake, my friend's overdose. All my real bite by the time I escaped. The door behind me slammed shut. The screen went dark. I told Russell everything. He just nodded. "It's the theater," he said. "It records what hurts, shows it back when you're weak." I quit the next day, moved out of town. Haven't watched a movie since. But sometimes, late at night, I hear the whir of a reel behind my bedroom wall. And once I swear I woke up with a film canister beside my bed. My name scratched into the metal, and beneath it, a sticky note. "Next showing, when you forget again." My name is Dorian Skell, and when I was 17, I worked part-time at Harland Cinema, the kind of place that smelled like old cola and mildew. Most shifts were harmless, checking tickets, cleaning popcorn, until I discovered the room behind. Screen 3. It started when I found a ticket stub in the lobby. Not strange, except it had no time, no movie title, just 2 words: Playroom Access. I asked the manager, Old Man Withers, about it. He got real quiet, then simply said, "Don't go poking around Screen 3. It's archived." Archived. What the hell did that mean? Of course, I poked. Late one night, after the last show ended, I used the skeleton key and unlocked the hallway behind Screen 3. It was narrow, dusty. A dead bulb above buzzed dimly. At the end, an old red curtain. Behind it, a door marked Children's Playroom. I stepped in. It looked like a daycare from a different century. Peeling circus wallpaper, toy chests, cribs with bite marks. The light inside buzzed erratically. In the far corner, a dusty rocking horse, rocking on its own. I turned to leave. Door gone. I reached for my walkie. Static then. Laughter, high-pitched, giddy. Wrong. From behind the rocking horse, a child crawled out, but not a normal child. Its eyes were too wide. Its mouth hung open, too many teeth, like piano keys. It pointed at me and said, "You're late." Suddenly, the toys began moving. Dolls turned their heads. Jack-and-O-boxers cranked themselves. A puppet on the shelf whispered, "Stay and play, Dorian." How did it know my name? I backed toward the curtain, heart slamming. The child lunged on all fours like a spider. I threw a toy chest in its path and burst through the curtain. I stumbled into the theater, empty seats. The projector off. Everything was back to normal. Almost. Except no one remembered me entering screen 3. Except I aged 3 years overnight. And now, every time I pass that hallway, I hear it. That soft whisper. Late again. I quit. Burned the uniform. But I still dream of the playroom. Sometimes, I wake up with popcorn in my pockets. Sometimes, I hear the toys laughing in my closet. And once, just one sigh, woke up with a child's ticket stub in my hand. It read, Playroom Access. Admit 1. My name is Colton Wren, and I was the sound technician for the overnight movie marathons at Echo Real Cinemas. It was mostly dull adjust volume levels, cue surround effects, monitor the board, easy money. Until that night we were screening a 1960s psychological horror, The Mirror Room. Obscure, grainy, barely audible. I sat in the sound booth, sipping my third coffee, when I heard Ita's voice. Not part of the movie. Whispery. Female. Close. Can you hear me? I froze. Rewound the reel. Played it again. Nothing. Then, after a long silent frame, there it was again. Please. Don't rewind me. The booth went cold. I checked all mic inputs. All off. No live feed. No way that voice could have entered the track. I paused the film. Looked at the audio waveform. A sharp spike just where the whisper had been. I zoomed. In it looked like a heartbeat. Suddenly the reel jumped. The movie skipped forward, fast. Scenes blurring, music backwards. I slammed stop, and then silence, except for the speaker. He's listening now. The screen in the booth lit up, with my face live feed, even though the projector wasn't recording. Behind me, on the monitor, a figure. Long arms, no face, crawling down the wall like it was liquid. I spun. Nothing. But I wasn't in the booth anymore. I was on screen, trapped inside the grainy footage of the mirror room, my face flickering, my voice looping endlessly. Can you hear me? Now they screen that film every Halloween. People swear there's a whisper halfway through the second act. Some say it's static. Some say it's me. Still asking for anyone to hear me. My name is Elric Dane, and I worked night shifts at Celestial Moon Cinemas, the kind of rundown theater where popcorn smells like wet cardboard and no one checks the bathrooms after 11. My job was simple: take tickets, clean up puke, survive. Until morning, one night. We had a single late screening in Theater 6. The movie was some budget horror flick no one cared about. The box office was dead. Not a soul in line. And yet, a man handed me a torn ticket. No barcode, no date, no theater number. Just a seat. Row D, seat 9. He didn't say a word, just smiled and walked in. I checked the system, no sale, no comped tickets. No one was supposed to be there, so I followed him inside. Theater 6 was pitch black. No trailers, no ads. Just a countdown starting from 100, ticking down with every breath. I scanned the rows, empty, except for D9. He was sitting there, staring at the blank screen. But something was wrong. His body wasn't still. It shimmered, like static on old VHS tapes. I stepped closer. My radio hissed, "Do not speak to him." I jumped. Thought it was a prank. Reached for my flashlight, it sparked, and died. The man turned his head, not fully, just enough to reveal a lack of a face. No eyes, no nose. Just a torn mouth that pulsed like it was breathing. Then, one by one, people began appearing in the seats around him. Old, pale, rotten clothes, silent. A full theater of them. I backed up, heart punching my ribs. The screen flashed white. A list of names rolled down, no credits. Just names. My name was at the bottom. Then everything shut off. Power, lights, my mind. When I came to, it was 4:06 a.m. I was outside Theater 6, locked, sealed from the inside. We never reopened that room, but sometimes, Even now, I hear footsteps behind me as I mop the sticky lobby floors, and a low voice whisper, "Row D is waiting." My name is Mavis Haller, and I was a janitor at the Rosevale Grand Theater, an aging cinema clinging to life with faded carpets and flickering bulbs. Everyone avoided the downstairs restroom, even managers told us. Just clean the upper level. But on Halloween night, the top floors were closed for renovation. And guess who got stuck cleaning the forbidden basement bathroom? Yup, lucky me. It smelled like mold and old urine. One long hallway, 2 stalls, one flickering light dot. As I scrubbed the sink, I heard a stall door creak open. I froze. I was alone. I walked toward the stalls. One was shut. A pair of shoes visible beneath it, muddy. Heavy boots pointed toward the toilet. I knocked. "Sir, this area's closed." Silence. Then, a low, croaking voice. "Occupied." I blinked. The temperature dropped. My breath fogged. "Sir, I'm gonna need you to leave." Occupied. Same word. But this time, it echoed, like it bounced off faraway stone walls. I kicked the stall door. It swung open. No one there. Just boots. Sitting by themselves. Upright dot. And on the back wall, written in something dark, encrusted. Occupied since 1974. Suddenly, the other stall slammed shut behind me. I turned. No shoes visible. Just shadows leaking out from the bottom. I backed out, heart pounding as I reached the hallway. The light died, and behind me, from both stalls at once, "Occupied, occupied, occupied." I ran, tried to quit the next day. They wouldn't let me. Said I signed a contract. Permanent staff. NaN-transferable. They showed me the paperwork. My signature was there. Dated October 31st, 1974. I wasn't born until 1995. Now I mop those stairs every night. And when I pass the downstairs restroom, I don't check the stalls anymore, because they're still occupied. My name is Daron Clove, and I worked as the projectionist at the Hallmark Theater, an ancient cinema built in 1926, full of dust, creaks, and more ghosts than guests. They brought me in because I still knew how to handle 35mm reels. No one wanted to touch the old projector in Theater 3. Not after what happened. I didn't believe the rumors, not until I screened that film. It arrived with no return address, no label, no markings, just a rusted metal canister, cold as a morgue drawer. Inside was a single reel, scratched and brittle, and a note. "Play only once. Do not watch." Naturally, I thought it was some marketing stunt, an underground film trying to build hype. So I queued it up during our midnight showing slot, hoping for weird but artsy. I wish it had been artsy. The moment the film started, the projector screamed, not a mechanical hummus scream. Like metal being tortured, on screen. A man, tied to a chair, in a small, windowless room, his mouth sewn shut. Behind him, shadows moved, even though there was no visible light source. I tried adjusting the focus, thinking it was a bad reel. But the man looked straight at me, not at the audience, at the projection booth. The screen went black. Then, a new shot. My projection room, perfectly mirrored. Same coffee cup, same scratched desk, same flickering red bulb, except ... There was someone in it, someone standing where I was sitting. I turned. No. One. I looked back. The figure was closer now. Closer every second. I flipped the projector switch off. Nothing happened. Pulled the plug, still running. Slammed the power breaker's darkness finally. But the screen glowed one last time. It showed me on the floor. Eyes burned out. Mouth wide open in a silent scream. I ran out and locked the booth. Later, when I returned with a flashlight and backup, the reel was gone. So was the film in the system. But the booth mirror had something new scratched. into it. Watched too long. I don't work there anymore, but every once in a while, I wake up in the middle of the night, ties burning, mouth sewn shut in my dreams, and I swear I hear the old projector turning. ... In a room I can't escape. My name is Alia Trent, and I used to run midnight horror marathons at a tiny indie cinema called the Hollow Reel. It was one of those places that smelled like stale butter and nostalgia. We had a cult following, people who thrived on jump scares and grainy slashers. But what happened during our Lost Films night wasn't a gimmick. It was something else, something that shouldn't have been seen. That night, we were showing a recovered reel from a 1973 movie called The Portrait Room. Never released, never finished, rumored cursed total urban legend stuff. Of course, that made it perfect for the lineup. We had maybe 12 people in the audience, regulars, hardcore horror fans, the kind who laugh when someone gets decapitated. The moment the film started, I knew something was off. There was no title card, no sound, just a grainy shot of an empty room, a chair, a mirror, and a single, flickering light bulb. And then the mirror moved. Not the camera, just the reflection. I thought it was clever editing, until someone in the audience screamed. I looked down from the booth, and a guy in the third row was standing, pointing at the screen. He was yelling something, but no sound came out. I turned up the booth mic. Still nothing. Like the audio itself had been erased from the theater. The others were frozen in their seats. Not like scared, stiff, like literally frozen. No blinking, no twitching. Like wax statues mid-breath. I ran down, waving my flashlight. They didn't even flinch. The screen now showed a close-up of the chair. A woman was sitting in it, head tilted sideways. Her eyes were sewn shut. She began to move, slowly lifting her chin toward the camera. As she did, every bulb in the room shattered at once. My flashlight died. Emergency lights. Nothing but the film ... kept playing. I swear on my life I saw something crawl out of the projector light, like it stepped between the film and the screen. A figure made of flickering shadows and static. It dragged itself down the aisle, glitching like a broken GIF. I backed away, heart in my throat. It passed each frozen viewer, leaning in, whispering something to them. Then it turned to me, no face, just the hiss of burned film stock and a mouth, like a ripped reel. It said one word: projector. I ran back to the booth and shut everything down, hit every kill switch, pulled the reel mid-spin and threw it in a fireproof case. The second I did, the lights came back. People blinked, gasped, looked around like they'd just woken up from a dream. Only the man from the third row was missing, his seat still warm. We reviewed the CCTV later. He never arrived. No footage of him walking in, no ticket record, but his coat was found draped over seat C4, folded neatly. No one's dared show the portrait room again. It's locked away. But sometimes, when I'm alone, I hear the hum of a projector spinning. ... And my shadow glitches just a little too late. My name is Kellen Voss, and I took my girlfriend June to Silver Haze Cinemas on a quiet Thursday night. It was her idea to catch some obscure indie drama that had zero trailers but glowing reviews. I'm more of a slasher guy, but hey, relationships are about compromise, right? The movie was called In Silence We Rest. Never heard of it. No poster. Just a white marquee with that title, glowing faintly like a tombstone. There were maybe 6 other people in the room, scattered, quiet. The movie started with no logos, no music, just black screen, and a single, slow whisper. Stay still. I turned to June, smirking, thinking this was some artsy build-up. But she was staring straight ahead, her hands clenched tight on the armrest. I whispered, "You okay?" She didn't respond, didn't even blink. Then the movie shifted. Still no sound. Just static slowly forming an image of theater, just like ours, with people sitting in the exact same seats we were. I looked around, the guy 3 rows ahead of us. On screen, the couple in the back, also on screen. US. Right there in the middle. Motionless. Except in the movie, one by one, each person began to vanish. No scream, no fade, just blink, gone. I stood up. That's when the whisper came again, this time from behind me. Sit down. I froze, turned slowly. No one there, but the screen changed. Now it showed me standing, looking behind me, in real time, only. In the movie version, something was right behind me. Long limbs, pale skin, a face made of hands. June finally moved. She gasped, tried to stand, but her legs buckled. It was like the seat itself held her in place, and one by one, the other people in the theater started to vanish for real. This time, a blink, a twitch dash, gone, no noise. Just the flicker of the screen, matching each disappearance like a script, playing out live. We sprinted for the exit, but when we got to the door, there was no lobby, no light, just a blank wall of gray, like the set of a play, left unfinished. I turned back, and the theater was empty. No June, no seats, no screen. Just me, and silence. Then the screen flickered back on. It showed one seat occupied, me, watching myself. The whisper returned, now from every direction. In silence, we rest. My name is Callan Drove, and I've worked as a projectionist for over 12 years. I've always liked being behind the scenes, up in the booth, where the real hums louder than the crowd. The theater I worked at, Luna Grand, had been around since the 1940s. Dusty red velvet curtains, a ghostly echo in the halls, and chairs that creaked like they remembered better days. It was a Wednesday night, dead, as usual. One customer bought a ticket for the 9:45 p.m. showing of a black and white classic. One ticket. I remember because when I tore the stub, he didn't say a word. He just nodded, walked in, and disappeared into the darkness of screen 3. From my booth, I could see every seat on the security monitor. The guy sat dead center row H, seat 7. No popcorn, no drink, no movement. About 20 minutes into the film, I saw a flicker on the screen, not from the projector, but from the feed. A shadow shifted 2 rows behind him. I rewound the footage. Nothing. Played it again. Still nothing. Then I looked again at the monitor. He was gone. Not the shadow. The man. I blinked. Rewound again. Still in his seat, but live feed. Empty chair. I checked the hallway. No one left. The auditorium door never opened. It couldn't have. I'd have seen it on the outer cam. I decided to go down. The theater was colder than usual, and when I pushed the door to screen 3, the movie froze. Not skipped, froze. Like someone pressed pause on the world. The screen showed a single frame now. The man, sitting in his seat, staring directly at me. But the seat in real life was empty. I turned back to the lobby, heart pounding, like a drum solo. Then I heard it. Creak, creak, creak. Footsteps, slow and deliberate. Walking across the aisles of screen 3, I spun around. Nothing. Then the lights flickered. All the screens in the building turned on at once, each showing a different angle of the same seat. Row H, seat 7. All empty. But on each screen, a new figure began to appear, translucent at first, then more solid. All of them with blank eyes and wide, permanent smiles. And they all looked like the man. A voice whispered from the speakers. Not over the PA, but from inside the walls. This seat is never empty. It only waits. I ran. Locked the projection room, shut off the system, called my boss the next morning, and quit, without picking up my last check. That was a year ago. I heard the theater reopened under a new name, Novalight Cinemas. A trendy rebrand, same old haunt. I read in the paper last week that a customer went missing after the 9:45 show. No one saw him leave. His car is still in the lot. The staff says they reviewed the footage. Last frame, row H, seat 7, empty, until he turns his head toward the camera and smiles.